Hey folks, just wanted to give you a heads up before the first episode of Chel Talk with Zuu and Bee. Bee's microphone was having a little bit of issues during the recording. This will be fixed for episode 2, so bear with us for now. Hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to Chel Talk, the place for all things hockey, from bar down snipes to bone rattling hits. We're here to talk about it. Introducing your host, YaBoyZuu and Bee Rhodes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Chel Talk with Zuu and Bee, the podcast for all things hockey. I am Zuu, aka YaBoyZuu. I am joined here with my co-host, Bee Rhodes. Bee Rhodes, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's been a long road back. My laptop died, so I apologize for that. But we got a new one, and we're ready to go, and couldn't be more excited for the hockey season.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you guys don't know, recently we had to rebrand the podcast. Before we were known as the Cherry Pickers Podcast, but now on my channel, YaBoyZuu, we will be uploading the podcast as Chel Talk, as well as the podcast will be available on all other streaming platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. Like B. Rhodes said, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. No worries, we are back, and we are so excited for the NHL season. B. Rhodes, I'm gonna spring you one with here real quick before we even get into it. I just straight up give me one bold take that you have for this NHL season. It could be literally anything. Give it to me. Give me a bold take right off the hop.
Bold take?
I want one bold take,
okay.
brother.
I'm going to go bold take. I think Tampa Bay might miss the playoffs this season.
Damn, okay. B. Rhodes coming in hot already. Hey, if you agree with B. Rhodes and you're over on YouTube, leave a comment down below. Say, I agree with, I stand with B. Rhodes. I stand with B. Rhodes. Tampa Bay to miss the playoffs. That's crazy. Hey, we are so happy to be back, and we are happy that you are listening. We hope that you guys go on to enjoy the show. Of course, this is Chel Talk. This is the podcast for all things hockey. We'll be talking about the NHL, the AHL, every league. We'll even be talking about NHL 25, the video game, you know what I'm saying? So I hope that you guys enjoy the show and that you're here for the ride with us. Now, before we get into the episode, we do have to talk about a little bit of a travesty in the NHL. That, of course, being the passing of Matthew and Johnny Gaudreau. Of course, they passed away this offseason due to a fatal collision. Obviously, a tough time in the hockey community. Obviously, Johnny and Matty, very loved, respected by not only the fans, all the players, management, etc. Of course, Johnny had such a big legacy with the Calgary Flames and, of course, the Columbus Blue Jackets as well. Me being a Flames fan myself, very tough, very hard to hear that news. Obviously, we wish nothing but the best for the Gaudreau families and all that are affected. Brody, if you just want to give your thoughts on Johnny Gaudreau, the type of legacy that he left in the NHL world.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, Johnny Gaudreau was a world-class player. He was a elite player in the NHL for a number of years with the Calgary Flames or the Columbus Jackets. Me being on the other side of the rivalry, being an Oilers fan, obviously I hated Johnny. I mean, you never want to see that happen to anybody. It doesn't matter who. Very unfortunate to Johnny and his brother Matt. Also, even for his sister, man, like she was just about to get married to the day before her wedding. She lost both her. That is so tragic. My condolences. It's tough, man.
Yeah, especially the sister, and as well as the now widows of Johnny and Matthew. Of course, Matthew expecting his first child, and Meredith Gaudreau, Johnny Gaudreau's wife, announcing in one of the services that she's currently pregnant with Johnny's third child. So obviously going to be tough on those kids growing up and not being able to meet their dad, but obviously a legacy that has been left, and fantastic, NHL community, everyone getting together. Does not, like Brody said, does not matter the team that you support. Everyone stood together and mourned the two Gaudreau brothers. So yeah, very tough situation. Like I said, all our thoughts and prayers are going to the Gaudreau families and everyone that was affected by their sudden losses. So all right, so sticking on the conversation of hockey, Friday is the release of early access of NHL 25. I myself obviously have pre-ordered it, seeming that, I make content on it. Brody, you also pre-ordered NHL 25 as well. What are you looking forward to in this game, in this new game?
For me personally, I'm very excited for the GM mode. I never played too much of it previous NHLs, but just the amount of depth that they went into for this GM mode, it looks very, very excited to try that. And for me, I know it's a very minor detail, but just the skating animations that they went for NHL 25, it seems a lot more realistic to how the real NHL is. So I'm excited to play the game, get a feel for how that is. But yeah, the GM mode for sure is probably the thing I'm most excited about for NHL 25.
Yeah, franchise mode looks like a ton of fun. If you are a fan of the content on my channel, you might know that I play a lot of World of Chel and stuff like that. But behind the scenes, I play a ton of franchise mode. Like me and Brody have been playing franchise mode. Well, we've been playing Chel since NHL 07. So, but franchise mode, man, I tell you, like I put ungodly hours into that mode. I literally go all the way to the end of the 25 years. Like I do some stupid stuff on there, and anytime that there's an update for the franchise mode, like 9 times out of 10 it's a good update, but just making it even more realistic to the real NHL, like adding the no move clause and stuff like that into franchise mode, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to, kind of make these dynasties and stuff like that. So that's going to be fun. But like you said too, with the skating as well, I think that now that they're making the game only on next gen consoles, I think that they're going to be able to utilize the power of those next gen consoles. And I really think that hopefully the gameplay is going to play a lot better than 24, because I was not a fan of 24. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'd give it on a scale of 1 to 10 like a 4. Like I was not a huge fan of the gameplay of it, but yeah, dude, NHL 25 is going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, it comes out on Friday. I'm not sure when this podcast episode is going to be uploaded. We're recording this on the Wednesday before the release, but it's going to be exciting, man. Quick question, B. Franchise mode. What team are you starting with for your first franchise mode? Let me know.
For me, I think it's going to be the San Jose Sharks. I want to take a team that's obviously in a rebuild right now and just see if I can turn them into a dynasty with all the new. I would definitely say either San Jose or Chicago for me.
Yeah, San Jose is going to be a fun one. They made a lot of moves in the offseason, and we are going to get to that soon, as we're going to be going over every single team's offseason moves and give them a rating, a letter grade from A to F. But yeah, San Jose is going to be a fun one. They just got young guys like, obviously, the first overall pick, Macklin Celebrini. They got Will Smith. They just traded for Yaroslav Askarov. Like, they're going to be a fun little team that you could definitely turn into a dynasty. But yeah, that's a good choice. I like San Jose. I think for me personally, I think I'm going to do Utah, dude. I think I really want to do Utah. Like, I think Utah is a sneaky team that, with a couple tweaks, could be a pretty good team. So I want to try and mess around with the brand new Utah. I guess we should cover that, huh? Seeming that the last time we uploaded an episode of a podcast, it was still the Arizona Coyotes. But no more is the franchise of Arizona. It is now the Utah Hockey Club. Brody, what do you think about Arizona's relocation to Utah?
I mean, to be honest, it was kind of like we all saw it coming. Like, it was only a matter of time with Arizona. They could never get arena deals done. It was just absolute chaos over there. So I don't mind the move to Utah. There's teams out there that could have gotten an NHL franchise. Like, I know a lot of people want to see Quebec come back, and there's been a lot of talk about Houston as well, but I don't mind Utah, but it'd be nice if they got a name eventually, because Utah Hockey Club is just kind of boring. But
so there's a couple names that are kind of like the top dog, the leading contenders for the names. The two that I've seen so far, obviously the Utah Yetis, but the other one is the Utah Blizzard. Which are you picking, Brody? If you're the owner of Utah Hockey Club, you got to set a name for the team. Are you going Yetis or are you going Blizzard?
I got to follow my boy 2BC Productions GM mode and go with the Utah Yetis. I think that sounds better than Utah Blizzard, personally. It just rolls off the tongue.
Hell yeah. Yeah, shout out to Johnny Superb, man. I had another name that I really liked. I don't know why, but no one else liked the name but me for some reason. And I just, like, every time I said the name out loud, it just rolled off the tongue so well. I want Utah to go as the Utah Outlaws. What do you think of that, B? What do you think of the Utah Outlaws?
That's interesting. I mean, they are in that area of the United States where all the like Western
Desert.
movies. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting take. That's a pretty cool name too.
I like the Outlaws. I mean, I wouldn't be upset with the Utah Yetis. I don't think I really like the Utah Blizzard because I feel like that like contradicts the Colorado Avalanche a little bit. You know, Avalanche and Blizzards. They're both just massive storms with snow. So like I think the Yetis would be ideal for me personally, but I don't know. I like the Utah Outlaws. That's my preference. But yeah, Utah Hockey Club, no longer Arizona Coyotes. And they made a couple splashes at the trade, or not the trade deadline, but the NHL draft. And we'll get into that right away. But look for them to be a little competitive this year. But B, I think it's about time that we hop in to the 2024 offseason moves of every single NHL team. So how this is going to work, I'm going to read off the team, the signings, the trades, yada, 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 the stuff that they did in the offseason. And all I want you to do is give me your thoughts on that team's moves. And then I want you to give them a letter grade. Anywhere from A, B, C, D, or F. F being the worst, A being the best. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. We're going to start off with the Anaheim Ducks. The old Anaheim Ducks. Obviously not a big contender this year. But Anaheim did make quite a few moves this offseason. So first of all, they started off by signing Urho Vakanainen to a deal, 1 year, 1.1 deal. Obviously, you know, a not as big defenseman, but I'm signing nonetheless. They also signed Brett Leeson to a 1 year deal worth $1.05 million. Their next big move was they traded a 2026 fourth-round pick to Seattle. In exchange, they received defenseman Brian Dumoulin. They then signed Jansen Harkins to a 2 year deal for under $1 million per season. Then they traded Gage Alexander to the Detroit Red Wings for Robbie Fabry and a 2025 fourth. They also signed their third overall pick that they drafted in this year's draft. I'm going to butcher his name. I hope you know how to say it, Brody, because I don't know how to say it, but it's Beckett Senecki or something like that. Senecki? I don't know how to say his name, man.
It's Beckett Seneca.
Seneca, there we go. I was writing down these notes and I was like, man, I better figure out how to say his name. Never figured out how to say his name. Beckett Seneca, third overall pick of this year's draft. They signed him to his entry-level contract. This name, however, Brody, I can definitely say. They signed the 23rd overall pick, Stian Solberg, to his entry-level contract. Now, for those of you that don't know, my last name is Solberg. I have no idea if I'm related to Stian or not, but I love his game, and the Anaheim Ducks signed him to an entry-level contract as well. Another signing by the Ducks, they signed Jackson Lacombe to an extension, 2 years, under $1 million per season. And last but not least, they named defenseman Radko Gudas as their captain. Brody, what are you giving Pat Verbeek and the Anaheim Ducks on letter grade?
I'm going to give Pat Verbeek a B-. I like the additions of Robbie Fabry and Brian Dumoulin. It definitely helps the Anaheim Ducks decor, which is actually looking very good in the future, by the way. They've got some really good defensive prospects. For Robbie Fabry, like, the moves they made don't really seem to address their better right. To me, it just seems like they didn't do a whole heck of a lot. They didn't do major. Got some pickups, but it's a B.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat as you. I'm actually going to give him a C instead of a B-. I don't mind the extensions on Jansen Harkins and Jackson Lacombe. I like the trade for Brian Dumoulin. It's pretty low risk. And like you said, their decor is going to be nasty. They do have a couple good defensive prospects like Pavel Mintyukov and Owen Zellweger. But other than that, like you said, pretty lackluster. No big free agent signings or anything like that. Anaheim's definitely going to be a bottom 5, bottom 10 team this year. So nothing crazy by the Ducks end, but hey, sometimes you just got to get through a season and, you know, do your big moves next season. So let's move on to the Boston Bruins, who did not do a heck of a lot, but they did have 2 big free agent signings. We'll start off with the small one. Max Jones, they signed to a 2-year deal, $1 million per season. Pretty small deal there. The next big one was big Nikita Zadorov. They signed him to a 6-year deal worth $30 million, a $5 million AAV. And the last one, Elias Lindholm, 7-year deal worth $54 million, comes out to a 7.75 AAV. What are you rating the Boston Bruins, B?
I'm going to give the Boston Bruins an A. I like them getting Elias Lindholm. That's going to help their center core, which now without Patrice Bergeron or David Krejci. Nikita Zadorov. They can't call him Big Z in Boston. That's a crime. You can't do it. But he's going to add some size and grit to that Boston blue line, help them for the playoffs. And they can get Jeremy Swayman done, man. I think the Bruins are going to be a good team this year. And I like the moves that the Bruins made, so I'll give them an A.
I like it. I'm also going to give them an A as well. Like you said, that D-core is going to have so much grit. Like, their top 4 D-core is going to be Hampus Lindholm, McAvoy, Carlo, and Zadorov. Like, that is such a tough D-core to play against, especially in the playoffs when the physicality amps up and the penalties go down. Like you said, Elias Lindholm, perfect 2C. Yeah, they're so weak down the middle. Like you said, losing Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. Charlie Coyle is not the best answer for 2C, so Lindholm definitely makes sense. I honestly thought Boston was going to trade for Lindholm at the deadline, but obviously Lindholm ended up in Vancouver anyways. But even the AAVs on those contracts, like, I definitely think Zadorov is worth 5. I think they actually got him on a little bit of a steal. Elias Lindholm at 7.75 is bordering high, but I think it's still fine. Me being a Flames fan, you know, I've watched Lindholm play a ton, and I know that he wasn't really the play driver on any of his lines, so he's really going to have to get some, you know, support from the cast, but I do think those are great acquisitions for the Bruins, and I think, yeah, I'd put him at an A as well. So let's move on to the Buffalo Sabres now. The Buffalo Sabres made quite a few little signings, nothing drastic though. They signed Sam Lafferty to a 2-year deal with a $2 million AAV. They signed Jason Zucker to a 1-year $5 million deal. That's probably their biggest move that they made. They also signed Nicholas Aube-Kubel to a 1-year deal worth 1.5. They re-signed Jacob Bryson to a 1 year under $1 million. They signed Big Dennis Gilbert to a 1 year under $1 million. Dennis Gilbert, of course, Flames legend. Speaking of legends, they signed James Reimer to a 1-year deal worth $1 million. Good old rhyme time. The only trade that they made in the offseason, they traded away Matthew Savoie to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Ryan McLeod and Tyler Tullio. They also signed Henry Jokiharju to a 1-year deal worth $3.1 million. They then signed their 14th overall pick of this year's draft, Konsta Helenius, to an entry-level contract. They extended Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to a 5-year deal for a 4.75 AAV. And then lastly, they signed Peyton Krebs to a 2-year deal worth $2.9 million. What are you giving the what are you giving the Buffalo Sabres there, B?
I'm going to give the Buffalo Sabres a B, and I'll explain why. Like, obviously, getting Jason Zucker is a good pickup for them for their depth up. Re-signing Peyton Krebs is big for them as well. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to get him locked up, your number 1 goalie. That's also a great signing. I was high on Buffalo's moves until you mentioned that trade. Buffalo's perspective, trading Matthew Savoie, a 9th overall pick. He tore it up in junior with Moose. He only has 1 NHL game on his belt. I don't understand where Buffalo is coming from, trading away high prospects away to the Edmonton Oilers for Ryan McLeod, who was best a 3C. I don't like that move for the Buffalo Sabres. So I'm going to give them a B.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way with you. Every single move they were making was a great move. Like you said, Jason Zucker adding a little more offensive firepower. You know, locking up UPL, like you said, getting your starter goalie locked up for under $5 million per season is really good. Getting Peyton Krebs signed to a 2-year deal is also good. But that Matty Savoie trade, man, does not make sense to me. Like you said, top prospect, almost 2 points a game in juniors. And to deal him for Ryan McLeod. I mean, Ryan McLeod, like, I get it. Fast player, plays hard. But he really doesn't have the scoring touch. And as Buffalo right now, Buffalo is one of those fringe teams. They're not trying to win it all. And I don't think Ryan McLeod kind of puts them over the fringe title. So realistically, giving up one of your top prospects for a player that's barely going to, you know, affect your franchise, that's kind of a rough move. So that move alone, I would have him, like, in this offseason before that trade, I would give him B+. And honestly, I think after that trade, I'm giving them a B-. I'm not a big fan of that trade, especially as a Flames fan, knowing that Matty Savoie is in the Oilers system now. That really stinks. Like, really stinks. So that one's tough, but once again, trade makes no sense. I'm giving them a B-. Speaking of the Calgary Flames, we're going to move on to them. This was obviously a pretty big, well, this last year and a half has been big for the Flames. Obviously, it has gone pretty downhill since the 2022 playoffs. And with Craig Conroy stepping in for Brad Treliving, there's been a lot of change for the Calgary Flames. But let's start with the Jacob Markstrom trade. So the Flames trade goalie Jacob Markstrom to the New Jersey Devils at, I think it's believed 30% retained. It's 1.875 retained. They trade him to the Devils. In exchange, they get Kevin Ball, a big defenseman, and 2025 first-round pick, but top 10 protected by the Devils. They then trade Andrew Mangiapane to the Washington Capitals for a 2025 second. They sign Anthony Mantha to a one-year deal worth $3.5 million. They then extend Yegor Sharangovich to a 5-year deal that works out to about 5.75 AAV. They sign goalie Devin Cooley to a 2-way deal. They also sign hometown Jake Bean to a 2-year deal worth 1.75 AAV. They signed former Flame Ryan Lomberg to a 2-year deal. Makes about $2 million per season. That's Stanley Cup champion Ryan Lomberg, by the way. They then signed their 9th and their 28th overall pick in this year's draft to their entry-level contracts, that being Zane Parekh and Matvei Gradin. And then last but not least, they signed Dustin Wolf to a 2-year deal where he makes just under $1 million per season. Brody, what are you giving Craig Conroy on a letter grade?
There's a lot to dissect with that, so you might have to repeat some of that for me. But honestly, I'll give Calgary an A. I do like the moves that they made this offseason, and I want to go through all of them. So we'll start with Yegor Sharangovich getting, what did you say? It was a 5-year, $5.75 million AAV?
That's the deal, yep.
I do like Yegor Sharangovich, 30-goal scorer. He's still young. I'm not sure how old he is. You would know better.
26, 27. Something like that.
Yeah, so 26, 27, he's entering the prime of his career. For a team that's rebuilding now, I'd say, in my opinion, after the 2022 playoffs, to get him locked up to that deal, I think is a great deal for Calgary. Dustin Wolf getting locked up for 2 years at $1 million AAV?
Just under $1 million. It's 1.7 total. So
again,
the thing about, sorry to cut you off. The thing about Dustin Wolf's contract is the first year is a 2-way contract, and then the second year is a 1-way contract. So that kind of affects things a little bit.
But again, to get your future number 1 goalie locked up to a 2-year deal, I think is also a great move for the team. Signing your 9th and 28th overall picks to an entry-level deal, obviously that's a good move as well. What were the other moves that you said? There's a few more.
Oh, we got a couple trades. We got the Jacob Markstrom trade to New Jersey, and then we also have the Mangiapane trade to Washington.
Right. So I'll start with the Jacob Markstrom trade. So trading Jacob Markstrom, retaining that amount of money is not a big deal for Calgary. They're going to be nowhere near the max cap anyway. Yeah. To get a first-round pick for him is good for their rebuild. I think that's a great pickup for them. Trading Andrew Mangiapane away to the Capitals as well. He had a high cap hit, I believe. He was making 5.
Yeah, he was making 5.5, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So to move that cap hit away to the Capitals and to get a second-round pick for that is also a good move. Anthony Mantha getting signed.
Yeah, Mantha. Yeah.
Mantha 1 year for 3.9 is what you said?
3.5.
3.5.
Yeah.
That's a great contract for him for 1 season.
He's gonna be a flip at the deadline for sure. They're gonna put him on a top 6 line, and they're gonna bump up his stats, and they're gonna flip him at the deadline. There's no way he stays a Flame by trade deadline.
No, but yeah, overall, I think the Flames made some good moves this summer, and they addressed some they needed to address. So yeah, I'll give them an A.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to give them an A. I know, they made some good trades, they made some good signings, but also at the same time, I feel like there was a little bit of value that was left off the table. Obviously, Markstrom, being traded to the Devils. Kevin Ball, I like Kevin Ball, big defenseman, 6'7". That 2025 top 10 protected. I highly doubt it's going to be a top 10, but the fact that you had to retain salary and you still get a top 10 protected pick out of it instead of no protection on it kind of stings a little bit. The Mangiapane trade was perfect. I'm glad we got that one done just for a second-round pick. That's pretty much all he was worth at that point, so I'm okay with that. I like Devin Cooley. I think Devin Cooley's got a lot of upside as a goalie. Of course, he was stuck in the Sharks organization last year where he only had 1 win. But granted, that 1 win that he had with the Sharks was a 50-save win. So he's got a lot of potential. Of course, he's also from Los Angeles, not Los Angeles, but California, which is also where Dustin Wolf's from. So that's kind of cool. They have that connection. I like bringing back Ryan Lomberg. I think he's a tough son of a gun. I think he's going to be a fun little guy to play out there. And then, of course, the draft, too. Matvei Gradin at 28 definitely surprised me. That was the pick that the Flames got from the Elias Lindholm trade from Vancouver. That one definitely surprised me. Did not expect him to even go in the top 40, 50. So for him to go to 28 was a little tough. But Zane Prek at 9 was a huge one for us. Of course, the Flames definitely lack center depth. So was really looking forward to hopefully getting a chance at Berkeley Catton, but unfortunately he went at 8 to Seattle. So picking up a defenseman like Zane Parekh that has that much offensive upside is always a good thing. So I think the Flames, Craig Conroy has done what he can do. And since his hands are tied, I'll give him a B+. Obviously, I would like to see a little bit more out of our players that we traded off, but to be able to get that much back still, that's still definitely deserving of a B+. All right. Obviously, we're going to talk about Calgary and Edmonton a little bit more than the other teams, as you could tell by the Flames jersey behind me and a couple Oilers jerseys behind B there. Those are obviously our favorite teams, so we're going to focus on those teams a little bit more. But let's jump over now to the Carolina Hurricanes, who they also had quite a busy offseason. So let's go over their big signings. First of all, they signed Jalen Chatfield to a 3-year deal worth $3 million per season. They also traded the rights to Jake Gensel to the Tampa Bay Lightning for a 2025 third. They re-signed Jordan Martinook to a 3-year deal that comes out to 3.05 AAV. They then re-signed Jacob Slavin to a big 8-year deal worth 6.46 AAV. They signed William Carrier to a really interesting contract. It's a 6-year deal, and he makes a total of $12 million. So it's a 6-year deal worth 2 for the AAV. They also signed Tyson Jost to a 1-year deal, league minimum. They signed Shane Gostisbehere to a 3-year deal worth 3.2 AAV. They signed Sean Walker to a 5-year deal worth 3.6 AAV. They signed Jack Roslovic to a 1-year deal worth 2.8. They traded Dylan Coghlan to the Winnipeg Jets to clear up some cap space. They then re-signed Jack Drury to a 2-year deal worth 1.73. Then the big dog, they signed Marty Necas to a 2-year deal where he's going to be making 6.5 for the next 2 seasons. And then another big deal, Seth Jarvis, re-signing him to an 8-year deal where he's making 7.9 AAV. So a lot of signings by the Carolina Hurricanes. B, what do you think of Carolina's work?
Yeah, Carolina was a very busy team this offseason, but I liked a lot of the moves that they won that kind of kills their grade for me. Pretty high on what Carolina did until you said trading the rights to Jake Gensel, 3rd round pick. I think Jake Gensel don't like that for Carolina. Marty Necas is definitely a good signing. It's definitely a bridge deal. 2 years, prove, and then give him his 8-year extension or whatever it is after that, his long-term deal. But yeah, Carolina, busy team for sure, but that Jake Gensel move kind of killed it for me. A B-.
I think the thing about Jake Gensel, obviously, is that Carolina has been backed up to the salary cap wall for the last couple years now. They've made some interesting trades, acquiring Brent Burns and stuff like that. Like, just a lot of salary cap they've taken on, and would have loved to see Jake Gensel re-sign in Carolina. See, this is a two-sided coin here. On one side, B, I agree that Jake Gensel could have fetched a lot more than a third for his rights. But also at the same time, I think Carolina was also backed against a wall, and they knew that they couldn't re-sign him, and they just had to get something for him. So, I don't know. That trade is definitely up in the air. I do like the re-signings of Jack Drury, Martin Necas, Seth Jarvis, and of course Jacob Slavin. They lost a couple big pieces on the D-core, which we'll talk about in a bit. So they kind of had to recoup from their losses. But I agree with the B-. I think they made a lot of moves, a lot of re-signings, not a lot of additions, but I still think Carolina is going to be a very solid team come this NHL season. Now let's move on to a completely different end of the spectrum, as we talked about a contender in the Carolina Hurricanes. Let's talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. Blackhawks made a few moves in the offseason. They started off by trading a 4th round pick in 2027 for Ilya Mikheyev and a 2027 second. That trade was also Sam Lafferty was also in that trade, but obviously they let Sam Lafferty walk and he went to Buffalo instead. They then signed Tyler Bertuzzi to a 4-year deal worth 5.5 AAV. They signed veteran defenseman Alec Martinez to a 1-year deal worth $4 million. They then signed former Hurricane and former Blackhawk himself, Teuvo Teravainen, to a 3-year deal, which makes out to 5.4 AAV. They signed veteran Craig Smith to a 1-year, $1 million deal. They signed goalie Laurent Brossoit to a 2-year deal, which works out to 3.3 per season. They then signed 3-time Stanley Cup champion Patty Maroon again to a 1-year, $1.3 million deal. They signed defenseman TJ Brody to a 2-year deal that works out to 3.75 per year. And then they also signed their second overall pick of the 2024 draft, Artem Levshinov, to its entry-level contract. Brody, how are we feeling about the Chicago Blackhawks offseason moves?
I think the fans of the Windy City should be loving their offseason. For me, they're getting my highest grade. I'm giving them an A+. They addressed everything that they needed to address this. They brought in some offensive help for Bedsy, bringing in Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi. They brought in leadership as well with Craig Smith and Pat Maroon, 3-time Stanley Cup champion. They also helped out their blue line by bringing in Alec Martinez, who is also a Stanley Cup veteran defense. Good veteran defense. Also brought in TJ Brody, who I know is also a pretty solid defenseman as well. I also like that move of bringing in Laurent Brossoit to back up Peter Mrazek. I do think he's going to challenge Mrazek. That helps their goaltending. Me, I think they addressed everything they needed to this offseason, so I'm going to give them an A+.
I like that rating. I don't know if I can go out of my way and say an A+. I understand where B's coming from. I will give them an A still. I like you said, B, everything that they did made sense. They made some good moves. I just think the quality of players that they acquired could have been a little bit better. TJ Brody's, getting up there in age. Same thing with Alec Martinez. Good veteran presence that will help out those young defensemen like Kevin Korchinski and, of course, Artem Levshinov, which they did sign. I think drafting Levshinov was a very, very good move for the Blackhawks. Now you have a future where you have Connor Bedard up front, and then you also have Korchinski and, Levshinov patrolling the point. So I think they have a very bright future. But as for the time being, I like Laurent Brossoit, and obviously Peter Mrazek's kind of picked it up a little bit since he's joined the Blackhawks. So I think they're going to have a decent goaltending core. I think Chicago is definitely going to be a team that surprises people this year. I don't necessarily think they're going to be bottom 10 in the league. I don't think they're going to be in the playoffs, but I think they're going to be better than what a lot of people think they're going to end up this year. But there are some very solid acquisitions there for the Chicago Blackhawks. B gives them an A+. I give them an A. Good little offseason for the Blackhawks. Now let's move on to a quiet offseason over in Mile High City, Colorado. First of all, the Avalanche. They re-signed Casey Middlestat to a 3-year deal, which works out to 5.75 AAV. They also re-signed Jonathan Drouin to a 1-year deal worth 2.5. They signed, let's see my hockey knowledge remembers this. If I'm not mistaken, it was Vegas's first-round pick in their first season, Eric Brandstrom, who spent a lot of time with the Ottawa Senators, to a 1-year deal worth $900,000. They then signed defenseman Oliver Shillington, former Flame, to a 1-year deal worth $1.05. And then a big extension for Logan O'Connor, a 6-year extension, very similar to the William Carrier signing in Carolina. He gets a 2.5 AAV for the next 6 years. So not a big offseason for the Avalanche, but what are you giving them for a letter grade there, B?
I'm going to give the Avalanche a B-. I mean, nothing that they did was overly drastic. They also didn't hurt their team either. I like that Logan O'Connor signing, though. 6 years at 2.5 AAV. I believe
Yeah,
is what
2.5,
you said. Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid. Nothing on their cap because cap is going up, then that's going to be absolutely nothing against their caps. I do like that. Casey Middlestat re-signing. I do like Middlestat. I don't know if he's worth 5.75 AAV. That seems a little bit high for me, but he is a good player and a good. But yeah, overall, like Colorado didn't do anything major, but they also did. So yeah, I'm gonna give him a B-.
I think I'm gonna see your B minus, and I'm gonna raise it to a B plus personally. I think, like you said, they didn't do anything major. They didn't hurt their roster by any means, but I think what they did was what needed to be done. They re-signed the trade acquisition Casey Middlestat. Like you said, 5.75 is teetering on the high side, but I think that if you can get Middlestat rolling with some of the good offensive weapons on Colorado, I think that contract pays for itself. It's the same thing with Jonathan Drouin. Obviously played last year with his old junior teammate Nathan McKinnon. Obviously they loved him enough to bring him back one more year at a very small cap hit. And then I like the chances that they're taking on Eric Branstrom and Shillington. You know, Eric Branstrom hasn't really made the most of his opportunities in Ottawa, hence the reason why he walked for so cheap. And then, you know, giving Oliver Shillington a chance. These are two defensemen that can really move, and they can move with the puck. And having those two defensemen learn from, you know, one of the best puck moving defensemen in the NHL in Cale Makar, I think that's a really good low risk, high reward opportunity for the Avalanche. And then, like you said, Logan O'Connor's contract worth almost nothing, and they get him for 6 years too. He's a great shutdown bottom six guy. So I think the Avalanche actually, like in my opinion, did exactly what they needed to do. I wouldn't warrant it an A because they really didn't make it that big of a splash, but I think the Avalanche had a pretty good offseason in my opinion. So let's move on to the Columbus Blue Jackets now. The Blue Jackets made a few signings, and they made a pretty big trade that we're going to talk about as well. But let's start off with the extension for Yegor Chinnikov, 2-year deal, making $2.1 per season. They then made a smaller trade by trading Alexander Texier to the St. Louis Blues for a 2025 fourth. They then signed Big Sean Monahan, another former Flame, to a 5-year deal worth $5.5 per season. They then signed former Blue Jacket Jack Johnson to a 1-year league minimum deal. They also extended Kent Johnson to a 3-year deal worth $1.8 per season. They also extended Kirill Marchenko to a 3-year deal worth $3.85 per season. They signed Cole Sillinger extension, 2 years, $2.25 per season. And then the most recent signing they made was James Van Riemsdyk for 1 year at $900,000. But the big trade that we got to talk about, Patrick Laine being traded to the Montreal Canadiens with a 2026 second-round pick. In return, the Blue Jackets are getting defenseman Jordan Harris. Brody, let's talk about the Blue Jackets. What are you giving their offseason a rating?
Nothing more needs to be said here. A plus. They get a pass for the offseason. It's been rough for them, man.
It's been
they
rough.
Get an A plus. Get an A plus.
Now, what do you think about that Patrick Laine trade to Montreal?
I think that's a good deal for them. Personally, they got a second-round pick out of it, and Columbus, we all know they are rebuilding.
No. The second-round pick went to Montreal.
Oh, is Laine and
it's
a
Laine
second
and a second for Jordan Harris.
Sorry. They got Jordan Harris. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Okay. Still, yeah, I do like the deal for them. Columbus is a rebuilding team. Patrick Laine is going to go to a team that he's going to have some offensive help. He's Juraj Slavkovsky, Cole Caulfield, have Nick Suzuki as well, who he's a really good player himself. So he's going to go to a team that he's going to have a little more chance to prove his offense talent. We all know Laine is a great goal, gotten 40 goals. Winnipeg. I think he's going to get at least 30 with the Canadiens this year. He's going to get power play time.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to have a good season. But yeah, the other moves that they made, like re-signing Kent Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, those are also good moves for Columbus. So for me, like, obviously I gave him an A+ as a pass for what happened in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they did have a good offseason. Yeah, they deserve that grade.
Yeah, I definitely think Columbus did what needed to be done. Getting rid of Patrick Laine. Patrick Laine was such a kind of headache for the Blue Jackets. Getting Jordan Harris in return, I'm a really big fan of Jordan Harris's game. I think he's a very solid defenseman. I think he's got a lot more upside to come. So getting a defenseman like that is a very good acquisition in return of getting rid of Patrick Laine. Like you said, the re-signings of Kent Johnson. Kent Johnson, a 3-year deal under $2 million. That's going to be fantastic in the last couple of years of his deal. Kirill Marchenko obviously has been a bona fide sniper the last couple of years. I think it was last year. Was it last year, B? I think Kirill Marchenko had something like 17 goals and 0 assists. Like, the dude just never dished the rock. He was just there to shoot it. So I love Kirill Marchenko. I think he's an awesome shooter. Big fan of the Sean Monahan contract. I'm really excited that Sean Monahan, after the rough few years in Colorado, holy man, the last few rough years in Calgary, dealing with injuries and stuff like that, getting dealt to Montreal and really building up his status again in Montreal and seeing him get rewarded for that is also massive. So I definitely like the moves that the Blue Jackets are doing. Like we said, not much expected of them. They're still a rebuilding team. They got a lot of good prospects in the pipeline. So overall, yeah, I'd give Columbus probably an A. I think it was a pretty good offseason for them, minus, the tragedies and stuff of Johnny Gaudreau. But I definitely think it was a good offseason for them, and I'm excited to see what comes this year for them. Let's move on to another busy team, but this time in the Western Conference. We're talking about the Dallas Stars. First of all, the Dallas Stars, they made a trade early in the offseason. They traded Ty Dellandrea to the San Jose Sharks for a 2025 fourth-round pick. They signed Casey DeSmith, goalie, from Pittsburgh. Wasn't he in Pittsburgh, or was he in Vancouver last year? I think he was... Was he Vancouver last year?
I think he was Vancouver, to be honest with you.
I think he was Vancouver too. Either Vancouver or Pittsburgh, either or. He signs a 3-year deal with Dallas, making $1 million per season. They then signed defenseman Matt Dumba to a 2-year deal worth $3.75 per season. They also signed another rough, tough defender in Ilya Lyubushkin to a 3-year deal worth $3.25 per season. They re-signed Niels Lundqvist to a 1-year deal worth $1.25. They re-signed Matt Duchene to a 1-year deal worth $3 million. They traded Radek Faksa to the St. Louis Blues for future consideration to free up some cap space. They then signed Colin Blackwell to a 1-year deal at league minimum. They also re-signed Esa Lindell to a 5-year deal worth $5.25. And then they re-signed Thomas Harley to a 2-year deal worth $4 per season. What are you thinking of the moves by the Dallas Stars, B?
I'm going to give the Dallas Stars a B+. I definitely like the moves that they made this summer. I'll start with the D-core. For starters, their defense core is strong.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Harley, Esa Lindell, Matt Dumba, Ilya Lyubushkin. I'll go through each of those guys one by one. Starting with Lyubushkin, he's a big defenseman. Dallas needs to acquire those. Hender, finals last year. I think bring physicality on factor in the. They're in a very tough Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
They got Nashville, Winnipeg. You throw Vegas in there. Like any of those contending teams, you gotta have that physicality. Like those moves. Up front, I like Matt Duchene getting re-signed at 1 year for $3. Good score. I think he's top 6 full. Still produced. Say he'd get around like 40 to 50 points. He's that caliber of player. So to get him a $3 million. So yeah, I think Dallas made the moves that they needed to this summer to try and get over the hump. So yeah, I give them a B+. I think they had a good summer.
I also agree. I'm going to give them a B+ as well. I think, obviously, the signings that they made were very good. The re-signings that they made, I don't think they overpaid on anyone. The free agent signings, like you said, Matt Dumba, Ilya Lyubushkin, very good pickups, especially in that rough and tough West Conference. I think the two signings that really stand out to me, though, the first one, Casey DeSmith. He's a bona fide backup goalie. He's a lot better of a backup for Dallas than Scott Wedgwood is. And to be able to get him for 3 more years at just $1 million per season is a really good signing. But I also like the signing of Colin Blackwell. I think a lot of people sleep on Colin Blackwell. Watching him play with the Blackhawks, obviously, Blackhawks, they didn't have a lot of offensive firepower last year, but Colin Blackwell made it work. He's a very hard worker. He's very fast. He's very underrated. And getting him for 1 year at league minimum, I think he's going to make a name for himself on the Dallas Stars. So I definitely think Dallas made the right moves. I think they signed the right players to the right deals. I think they picked up the right players. I think a B+ is definitely worthy. Let's move on now to the Detroit Red Wings, who they also had a pretty busy offseason as well. Let's start out with the first move that they made in the offseason, which was actually a trade. And they traded Jake Wallman and a 2024 second-round pick. I put in my notes, they traded Jake Wallman to Detroit. They traded Jake Wallman in a 2024 second to San Jose for future considerations. They then re-signed Patrick Kane to a 1-year deal worth $6.5 million. They signed goalie Cam Talbot, Oilers and Flame legend. 2 years, $5 million, so a 2.5 AAV. They signed Eric Gustafsson to a 2-year deal worth $2 million per season. They signed another Oilers goalie legend and Jack Campbell to a 1-year deal for league minimum. They signed Christian Fischer to a 1-year deal worth $1.25. They then traded Robbie Fabry to the Anaheim Ducks with a 2025 fourth rounder for Gage Alexander. They then signed Vladimir Tarasenko to a 2-year deal worth $4.75 per season. They then signed their 15th overall pick in this year's draft, Michael Brandsegn-Egard. He got drafted 15th overall this year. Notable also that him and Sten Solberg, the two Norwegians in the first round this year, they are both, well, I guess Nygaard is the highest ever Norwegian drafted player, but they're also both the only Norwegians that were ever been drafted in the first round. So that's kind of cool. They signed Joe Veleno to a 2-year deal worth $2.275 per season. And then the big contracts, the big ones. The first one coming is Lucas Raymond. Big contract extension for him. 8 years worth $64.6 million, which comes out to $8.075 per season. Now, they weren't done there, and they signed Moritz Seider to a 7-year deal worth $59.85 million, which comes out to $8.55 per season. How are we feeling about the Detroit Red Wings offseason this year, Brody?
We are feeling pretty good if you're in Michigan. I think the Detroit Red Wings made good moves this summer. Again, a lot to go through, so I'll have to go one by one, and I might need you to repeat some of those, but I'll give Detroit an A. I like that Raymond signing for them. I think that's, you need to get him done. He's your biggest prospect on forward. Got a great future ahead of him. Moritz Seider, man, you had to get that guy locked up. He's your number one defenseman. I think that's a great cap hit. $8.55 million, 7 years. Cap is going up, and he's a right shot defense, big defense. He's your franchise cornerstone back there. Good signing for them to get him done. But yeah, man, I gotta mention something about that's tough, man. You get a 5-year deal with the Oilers, making $5 million a year, and then after the second season, you get bought out.
Yeah,
that is brutal, man. And then Detroit picks him up for league minimum. Like, you hate to see that. Like, Jack Campbell is one of the nicest guys around, man. I like, no matter what team you cheer for, you don't want to see that happen to a guy where his career is basically done. This is like his last chance to. But to even make the roster for him at this challenge, that's tough. Speaking of the other goalie, I think Cam Talbot's a good pickup for them. Pretty small cap hit, and I think he's 36 now, I believe. Like, he's getting
something like
up
that.
there.
Yeah, he's up there.
He's still a good goalie. He had some great years in Edmonton. He had some good years in Calgary as well. And even before he came to the Oilers, like, he was rock solid for the Rangers. Henrik Lundqvist went down. Like, he played like 30 games. He won like 22 out of 30 games or something crazy like that. Like, he went on a tear. Proved that he was a number. Good pickup for the Red Wings for sure. Patrick Kane, a 1-year deal at 6.5. I am more than fine with. Like, Kane's got that chemistry with DeBrincat from Chicago as well. So yeah. I think that's a great pickup for them to keep him. And who else am I missing here?
Vladdy Tarasenko.
Oh, yeah. Vladdy Tarasenko. Cover boy of NHL 17, by the way.
Classic.
Yeah, again, a good signing for them. Like, Tarasenko is a great goal scorer. I think he's going to get you 20 goals for sure, possibly 30. He's going to be a big part of that power play if he power play time. So, yeah, I think another good pickup for the Red Wings. I'll give them an A. I think they had a good summer.
You know, hearing the words come out of your mouth, Brody, saying, it's coming from an Oilers fan, I got to talk about Jack Campbell. Inside my head, all I was saying was, oh no, what's he going to say? I think the tough thing about the Red Wings, though, especially with that Jack Campbell signing, there's no way he makes this roster. Like, the Detroit Red Wings have 3 already capable goalies that Jack Campbell's got to fight behind. You know, they got Ville Husso, they got Alex Lyon, they just signed Cam Talbot, and now Jack Campbell's got to find a spot in there to start. I don't see it happening. Jack Campbell, he's going to spend his entire season in the AHL. There's no way he makes it through that, 3 goalies. But other than that, I mean, like you said, there's some good signings here by the Red Wings. A big head scratcher for me is that Jake Wallman trade. Giving up a 2nd-round pick to get rid of Jake Wallman, who's really not making that much. I think his cap is only around $4 million, and he was really solid defenseman for the Red Wings last year. That one's definitely a head scratcher, especially when you still have D-men like Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie on the point. But regardless of that, the signings of Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, fantastic deals. Get them both under 9 mil each. That's fantastic. Vladimir Tarasenko, like you said, guaranteed 20 goal scorer, power play time. He's going to fire on all cylinders on that top six. And then, yeah, re-signing Patrick Kane, also a big one. I think Detroit did good. There was a couple head scratches, like I said, with the Jack Campbell signing, the Jake Wallman. I'll give him an A-. I'm going to give Detroit an A-. All right. Now it's time. Since we spent so much time talking about the Calgary Flames, let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers, Brody. I know you're ready for this one. I'm going to read off everything they've done. You already know what they've done, but let's talk about it. So, first things first. Re-sign Calvin Pickard, 2-year deal, $1 million per season. They also re-signed Connor Brown to a 1-year deal worth $1 million per season. Victor Arvidsson was one of the big free agent signings for the Oilers, 2-year deal, $4 million per season. They also signed Josh Brown to a 3-year deal, $1 million per season. They re-signed Corey Perry to a 1-year deal worth $1.4 million. They also picked up Jeff Skinner for a 1-year deal worth $3 million. They also re-signed Matthias Janmark to a 3-year deal worth $1.45 million per season. They re-signed Troy Stetcher to a 2-year deal, making $780,000 per season. They re-signed Adam Henrique to a 2-year deal, making $1.5 million. They also traded a 2025 fourth rounder to Vancouver for Vasily Podkolzin. They also traded Cody Ceci to the San Jose Sharks with a 2025 third for Ty Emberson. And there's some pretty big importance about Vasily Podkolzin and Ty Emberson. That being that the Oilers were offer sheeted on Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg by the St. Louis Blues, and Edmonton decided not to match those offer sheets. So in return, they received a 2025 third for Dylan Holloway and a 2025 second for Philip Broberg. But last but not least, the Oilers were not done there. The big talk of the offseason is Draisaitl going to remain with the team? Are they going to explore their options? Well, they decided to put that rumor to rest, and they re-signed Leon Draisaitl to an 8-year deal for $112 million, which carries out a $14 million cap hit. That makes him the highest paid player in the NHL. Break it down for me, Brody. Give me your rating on the Edmonton Oilers and let me know what you thought of their moves in this offseason.
Oh boy, I got a lot to go through with this team. Not only are they obviously my team, but they also did a lot this summer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to add on to one last thing. They also brought in a new general manager this summer too. They were a busy team, man. The Oilers, I will give them an A-. I was very high on what they did, but there was also a couple things I'm concerned about. So starting off, bringing in Victor Arvidsson, I think help their top six. Draisaitl needs some. With McDavid's got Nugent, Hyman on his line. Draisaitl needs some help, and if you can get both those top two lines, you're going to be a very scary team. Jeff Skinner, as well as Victor Arvidsson, I think a pickup for them. He's a 20-goal scorer, potential 30-goal scorer. Playing with $3 million for a 1-year deal. Deal for them. They win-win. If he sign him, if he doesn't, can't fit him in. That's fine. It's a 1-year deal. Good pickup for them. I think this is very underrated with the. I think the fact that they were able to bring the entirety of Matthias Janmark, Adam Henrique, and that Connor Brown all back, is huge for them. That line was level in the playoffs, and I think getting Janmark for 3 years at 1.45 is a good deal for him. Bringing back Adam Henrique, center, is a big pickup. He can produce offensively as well. He can get around 40 points for them. I think that's a great pickup for the Oilers as well. Connor Brown, I think getting him for 1 year at $1 million, again, good deal. Struggled at the beginning of the season, man. He could not buy a
Yeah, it's true.
He went 55 or some games before he finally got one, but in the playoffs he really proved why he was a good recovered from his injury. Got back up to playoffs. He proved why he's great on the penalty kill. He's pretty good at even strength as well. Positionally sound. I think that's a good pickup there. But my concern with this team is that blue line. I don't know. Last year they had Broberg. They also had C. I think their depth took a big hit there. I don't trust Kulak in that top 4 if that's where they really don't know much about Ty Emberson. He's a good prospect. He played with Holloway.
Yeah.
Played under Chris Knobloch before. But I can't make too much of it. I don't. Cody Ceci, like, they Oilers fans will probably have their knocks on him for really, he's an experienced player. I thought he was fine in that top. Losing Philip Broberg is huge. It's hard, man.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a big cap hit that the small sample size with the Oilers. But at the same time, the Oilers really
No.
losing him's tough, man. I think he really is the next Oscar Clark. Really good with.
Yeah.
That's a great. Dylan Holloway. That also. Honestly, I thought that
Yeah.
I heard that Dylan Holloway could go in that top 9, and I think Dylan Holloway has the potential to who he plays with.
Mm-hmm.
He had a pretty good playoff run. Also tough. Holloway. Yeah, the Leon Draisaitl contract. It concerns me. It really does. Like, obviously, Leon Draisaitl is a world-class player. Can't lose.
Yeah.
This has me concerned that Rally 2.0. Saw what happened when he first came in with Edmonton. Connor McDavid, huge extent. After their playoff run in 2018. Wasn't too long after that they started to completely fall out.
Yeah.
Nowhere near that. With Stan Bowman coming in, it has me concerned. Just gave Leon Draisaitl that massive contract. You know McDavid's next. He's going to 16.
Yeah.
14. Evan Bouchard's asking for play around 10. Probably going to go back into that same situation where cap hell, so to speak. Yeah, he made some questionable moves in Chicago, trading Artemi Panarin for Brandon Saad as well. So
Yeah.
people are high on Stan Bowman because of how well he did with the Blackhawks, but I'm concerned, man. So I think they make great additions offensively, but the defense has me concerned. Contract. There's a name.
Yeah, it's been a hell of an offseason for the Oilers, that's for sure. I think I'm going to stand on my hill and I'm going to give them a B+. I think, like you said, the fact that they were able to bring back the Connor Brown, Janmark, and Henrique line, and for all of them to make combined under $4 million is fantastic. Like you said, the Jeff Skinner signing, great deal as well. He's going to be... you said guaranteed 20 goal scorer. He might be a 50 goal scorer if he's playing alongside McDavid this year. Yeah, like the re-signings that the Oilers made were great value, decent term as well. I like the acquisition of Vasily Podkolzin and Ty Emberson. You know, Vasily Podkolzin, former first rounder that just really hasn't found the jump with the Vancouver Canucks. And then, of course, you know, Ty Emberson as well. Like you said, he's played in the Knobloch system, stuff like that. You know, right shot defenseman. He played for San Jose last year, played 30 games with them. He had 10 points, and he was only a -4 on a bottom 3 team in the NHL. So, you know, like, he's a solid defenseman. Yeah, man, like you said, that decor is looking a little scary. Like, obviously, you know, you got Bouchard and Ekholm, but really, what do you have after that? And that's really the scary part. Like you said, Kulak is definitely not a top 4 guy. Ty Emberson's definitely not a top 4 guy. Like, the decor is running very, very thin. And then you also didn't change any goaltending. Like, you still have Stuart Skinner as your starter, which, you know, is a solid goalie, but he's not really the goalie that's going to make up for the lack of defensive depth on that team. And then, of course, we talk about, you know, the Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway offer sheets and them not getting matched. It really sucks. I think, like you said, small sample sizes for those guys, But man, Broberg looked fantastic in the Cup final last year. And then Dylan Holloway also was on his horse too, and they looked really good. And man, it kind of sucks to see them go because I definitely think that they had a really bright future with the Oilers. But nevertheless, I mean, for in St. Louis's side, if you can get 2 former first-round guys for a second and a third, like, that's a fantastic gamble. And then last but not least, the Draisaitl contract. Like you said, elite talent, deserves to get paid that much. But yeah, that's going to put the Oilers in cap hell. Like you said, if McDavid's getting 16, let's say McDavid even takes a team-friendly deal, and he only takes 10 mil. Let's say he takes 6 mil off the table, right? You got McDavid for 10, you got Draisaitl for 14. Let's say, like you said, Evan Bouchard around 10. That's 34 million. Then you throw Nurse's 9.25 in there, and that's $43 million tied into 4 players. It gets a little tough building a championship caliber team when you have $40 million into 4 players. So it's going to be interesting. I think the Oilers this season are really on the cup or bust. And yeah, as for their offseason, like you said, they made some great moves. They made some questionable moves. All in all, I'll give them a B+. I think their great moves definitely outweighs the bad moves that they made. But still, those bad moves exist. So, hey, Brody, let's
the Toronto Maple Leafs about the 4 players.
Yeah, talk to Toronto about that. See how they're doing. See how many second round, playoff rounds they've won so far in the last decade. Let's talk about a team, Brody, that has done almost nothing this offseason. And rightfully so. Because they won the Stanley Cup. That is the Florida Panthers. All I have for Florida is 4 signings. We got, obviously, the big one. Sam Reinhart signs an 8-year extension with the Panthers, making $8.625 AAV. You got Dmitry Kulikov signing the 4-year extension with the Panthers, making $1.15 per season. You got AJ Greer, former Brew and former Flame, 2-year deal, $850,000. And then you got Anton Lundell, who's signed a 6-year deal with Florida, $5 per season. Florida Panthers, Brody, do you think they did too little, too much, or just right?
I think just right, man, to be honest. Stanley Cup for a reason. A deep team, good goal, good defense core. So I think the moves that they did make, I think Sam Reinhart, to get him locked up for 6.25 is a cap hit. Just potted 55 goals last year. Guy was a monster. That Anton Lundell contract is a good contract. I like Lundell as a player. And who are the other ones you said there? Sorry?
Dmitry Kulikov and AJ Greer.
Dmitry Kulikov, I think, is a good depth defenseman to have for Florida, and AJ Greer, I think solid player as well. So for me, I think Florida did what they needed to do, so I'll give them an A.
I'm also going to give Florida an A, especially with that Anton Lundell contract. I think Anton Lundell is going to be Barkov 2.0. The guy is he's a stud on both ends of the ice. He's fantastic in the defensive zone. He never gets caught out of position. He's always great with his stick, stuff like that, but he can put up 40 points a season. I definitely think that Anton Lundell contract is going to be one of the better contracts in the NHL, especially in the back end of that deal. AJ Greer, watched him a little bit with the Flames. He got injured, though. Definitely liked his game, though. He was a hard worker. He was always getting in the corner, stuff like that. I think that's a great signing for Florida. Like you said, Kulikov, great depth defenseman, only making 1.15 per season. That's fantastic as well. And then, of course, Sam Reinhart, man. Like you said, 50-plus goals last year. To get him for under 10 mil for 8 years, wow, that's a great contract. I think Florida had a great offseason. I think they had a lot of fun celebrating with Lord Stanley, and I'm giving them an A. All right, let's jump over to the other conference now. The Los Angeles Kings. The Los Angeles Kings didn't make a whole lot of moves in this offseason. Once again, they're also one of those fringe teams that are, make the playoffs, but get shell-shocked in the first round. Let's talk about the signings and the one trade that they did. So the first 2 signings they made, they signed their draft picks. Akil Thomas, 2-year extension, 1.15, so he's making $775 per season. And then they also signed Alex Turcotte to a 3-year deal where he's making the same amount per season. They signed Warren Fogle in the free agency for a 3-year deal worth $3.5. They also signed big defenseman Joel Edmondson to a 4-year deal worth $3.85. And then they extended Quentin Byfield, who had a hell of a season last year. 5-year deal for Quentin Byfield, making $6.25 per season. And then they made one trade in the offseason. They traded a 2025 second-round pick and a 2024 fourth-round pick to the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for Tanner Jeannot. What do you think about the LA Kings moves in this offseason, B?
Before I get into the LA Kings, I just want to say one more thing about the Panthers that I thought was hilarious. Even as a fan seeing my team heartbreaking Game 7, but just to see one of the clips of one of the golfers on Florida marking his ball with the Stanley Cup is the biggest flex you'll ever
that is
see,
such
and
a
I
big
loved
flex.
it. That was so funny. Yeah, I'll give the Kings a B. I mean, the Kings to me are like the Leafs of the East at this. They're just like a guaranteed first round exit at this point. Like they've been bounced the last 3 years in a row by the Oilers first round.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Warren Fogle, decent pickup, top 6 forward at best, top 9 usually is where he slots in. Yeah, I do like their signing of Quentin Byfield. I think that's a big signing for them. Byfield's got a great season. I like that pickup. I do like Joel Edmondson. I think he's a good top 6 defenseman, depth defenseman to have. He's big, he's physical. Need that in the play. I do like that signing for them. And yeah, Akil Thomas and Alex Turcotte. I think those are pretty good value contracts for me. So yeah, I'll give the Kings a B. I don't think they did anything crazy to really improve their team, but I don't think by any means that they got worse. I think average offseason, so average grade for me.
You know, I totally forgot to put something down in the notes, and I'm going to blame Puck PD on that one because it wasn't in their news or their acquisitions. There was a big trade involving the LA Kings that I completely forgot about. It was a 1-for-1 trade with the Washington Capitals. The LA Kings, or was that Winnipeg?
Oh, it was
No, it was
Capitals,
LA.
Yeah.
It was LA.
Yep.
Yeah, LA traded Pierre-Luc Dubois to the Capitals for Darcy Kemper. No retention, 1-for-1. What do you think about that trade, B?
To be honest, like I don't really like that trade for the Kings. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois, he didn't want to play in LA anyway. You know, like, I don't know. It just seems like Dubois, wherever he goes right now, he doesn't want to play there.
Yeah.
He just has that body language about him, that demeanor. I'm not a big fan of Dubois' attitude, to be honest, but for LA, like, I don't know. Kemper's a solid goalie, like not by any means top goalie in the league, but he's a good goalie. But I think you'd rather have Pierre-Luc Dubois, no? Like he's a top 6 center. Like I'd rather have him on my roster than Kemper. So I really don't know what to make trade for LA. I don't think it's the greatest trade for them, to be honest.
So for my rating for the LA Kings, I think this is the first time I'm giving out something lower than a B. I'm giving a C to the LA Kings. This was not a very good offseason, in my opinion, for LA. The two things that stand out for me, I think with the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, the fact that you're able to get rid of his contract with no retention is the only bright point about that trade. Darcy Kemper, like you said, he's okay. He'll be their starter, but he's not a standout goalie. And for what you had to give up to get Pierre-Luc Dubois, looking at how Gabe Vilardi's played in Winnipeg right now, man, that stings. And the fact that you had to give up all that, him, Rasmus Kupari, bunch of, pieces, to get a guy, sign into a big deal, and then be stuck with that cap hit and, only get Darcy Kemper out of it, that's tough for the Kings. Granted that they got something out of it is a win-win, but at that point, like you said, would you rather have a top 6 center or would you, rather have Darcy Kemper? So I don't know. That trade was kind of dicey. The only really big thing I liked about, LA's offseason was the Quentin Byfield extension. I think getting Quentin Byfield for, under 6.5 for 5 years, I think that's a great trade. I think he's going to, get even better this season, and I think that'll be one of the better contracts in the NHL, but I think, their signings in the free agency, Warren Fogle and Joel Edmondson, I think they're a little bit of an overpay. I wouldn't give Warren Fogle 3.5 in my opinion. I don't think he's really worth that. And then Joel Edmondson, like you said, you even said that he's, good bottom pair depth defenseman guy. I'm not giving someone 3.85 to sit in the press box and eat popcorn. So I don't like those signings necessarily. I think they're a little too high. and then also the Tanner Jeannot trade. Like, yeah, they paid less than Tampa Bay did because Tampa Bay paid like 5 draft picks for him, but I don't think Tanner Jeannot is worth a second and a fourth either. So I don't think it was a very good offseason for the Kings. I'm giving them a C. That's my rating.
Depends what kind of popcorn, though.
Dude, I don't know what kind of popcorn is worth $3.85 million, and I don't think I'll ever get to know. I don't think I'm making $3.85 in a year, but man, that's expensive popcorn. Let's move on to the Minnesota Wild, who also had a very quiet offseason. Nothing big on the Wild end. They did trade Adam Beckman to the New Jersey Devils for Graham Clark, a small AHL for AHL trade. They also traded Vinny Lettieri and swapped 2024 fourth rounders with Boston. They got Jacob Lauko in return. In the free agency, they signed Yakov Trenin to a 4-year deal worth $3.5 per season. They also re-signed Jacob Middleton to a 4-year deal worth $4.35. And then their biggest move of the offseason, they re-signed Brock Faber to an 8-year deal worth $8.5 per season. What do you think of Minnesota's offseason, B?
I think they had a decent offseason. For me, I'd probably give them a B. Again, like, nothing crazy. Obviously, that Brock signing is huge for them. He's their franchise. Getting him locked up for 8.5. Great deal for the Wild. But apart from that, really no major signings. Nothing to drastically improve the team. So for me, I'll give them a B. I think they had a good offseason, but not a great offseason.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give them a B-. Honestly, like, Minnesota's kind of in the same boat as the Los Angeles Kings, where they're, like, basically like a final wild card spot, but they're getting bounced in the first round. Like you said, the Brock Faber signing, fantastic. I'm very high on Brock Faber. I think he's going to be a fantastic defenseman for years to come. The Jake Middleton contract, not bad, 4.3. That's all right. Yakov Trenin for 3.5, I think is a good deal. I think Yakov Trenin's a very good third line center, good penalty kill guy, good shutdown guy. And then yeah, the 2 trades, very minor trades. I don't think it was enough for Minnesota. I think, if I'm not mistaken, from what I remember, I think this is like the years that like the Parise and Suter buyouts are really kicking their ass. So I feel like they don't have a lot of much space to work with. But even if you're a fringe team like the Wild, man, you got to do more than that. And I'm going to give them a B- for that. All right, Montreal Canadiens. Not a heck of a lot over in Quebec been done this offseason, but let's talk about it anyways. The first move they made, they traded Jonathan Kovacevic to the New Jersey Devils for a 2026 fourth. They then signed a big deal for Juraj Slafkovsky, former first overall pick. 8-year deal. He's making $7.6 per season. They then re-signed fan favorite Arbor Xhekaj, 2-year deal, $1.3 per season. They also re-signed Justin Barron to a 2-year deal, $1.15 per season. Then a big signing for Caden Gooley, a 6-year contract for him, making $5.55 per season. And then, of course, the big trade, the Patrick Laine trade from Columbus with the second-round pick for Jordan Harris. How are we feeling about Montreal, B?
I'm feeling pretty good about Montreal. I do like what they did. I like that they brought in Pat. Prolific goal, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Columbus. Juraj Slafkovsky, I think he's very young, great season. I think he's going to have a great career, so I do like signing for them. And I'm pretty high on Caden Gooley because I am wearing a shirt of the Edmonton Oil Kings.
Yeah.
Did come in on the Oil Kings when they did win that championship. He's a solid young defense. Getting him for 5.5 is good. Well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm fairly high on Montreal. I'll probably give them a B. I think they had a pretty good offseason. Nothing like groundbreaking or anything like that. No big splashes, but for me, I think they had a pretty good offseason.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm actually going to give the Montreal Canadiens an A-. I think they had a really good offseason. Like you said, the Juraj Slafkovsky deal, I think 7.6 for the next 8 years is a very good deal. I think it's going to be a steal in the last couple of years. Seeing their defensemen step up like Xhekaj and Barron and giving them, small deals, 2 years under 1.5 each. I think the ability for those two guys to step up and play more minutes gave them the flexibility to get rid of Jordan Harris and give a chance to Patrick Laine. for a relatively low risk, like Patrick Laine, like you said earlier, there's a good chance he could put up 30 goals this season on that power play with Montreal. And then, yeah, the Caden Gooley contract, too, I think was a very good contract. 6 years at 5.55 is a very good deal for Gooley. He's going to be solid for them. I think they had a great offseason. I think they really didn't need to do a lot. They're still going to be a fringe, bottom 15 team, but they made good signings and made a good trade. That's only going to help their future. So I'm going to give Montreal an A-. Okay, we got next two, I would say, are probably two of the three busiest teams in this offseason. So let's get through them. We're going to start with the Nashville Predators. And man, what an offseason for Smashville, dude. They first of all started off by re-signing their star goalie UC Saros to an 8-year deal, which just so happens to come out to 7.74 AAV. Not 7.5, 7.4, like his jersey number. They then signed big ol' Steven Stamkos, Tampa Bay lifer, Steven Stamkos, 4-year deal, $8 million per season. But they weren't done there with Stanley Cup champions. They also signed Jonathan Marchessault to a 5-year deal worth $5.5 per season. And then just to add the cherry on top, they signed Brady Shea to a 7-year deal, making $7 million per season. Now, they also re-signed Alexander Carrier to a 3-year deal worth $3.75 per season. They also signed goalie Scott Wedgwood to a 2-year deal, making $1.5 per. They also traded Cody Glass and a 2025 third and a 2026 sixth to the Pittsburgh Penguins to clear up cap space. And then probably one of the biggest trades this offseason, the Nashville Predators traded Yaroslav Askarov, Nolan Burke, and a 2025 third to the San Jose Sharks for Magnus Krona, David Edstrom, and a 2025 first. Holy Nashville. Let's talk about it, B. What are you giving them?
Smashville Predators smashed it in the offseason. I'm giving them an A+ for what.
Yeah.
This is a team that is trying to contend in the Central Division. Tough Central Division. Like Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg, etc. They were right on that first wildcard spot last year. I think they're trying to make a jump, and what better way to make a jump than sign the guys that they did, bringing in Steven Stamkos. This guy can still get 40 goals, 90 points. Getting him for 8, I think, is a pretty good deal for him. Jonathan Marchessault, again, another top 6 forward, 30 goal scorer, 5 years, $5.5 million, I think, is another good contract for him. And Brady Shea, man, just adding to that defense, he's a good top 4 defenseman. He's going to add to their success as well. And UC Saros, man, getting your number 1 goalie locked in. Cap hit 7.7. And I think UC Saros is, to me, I would probably put him as a top 5 goalie in the league. In that top 5 range. For sure in the top 10, he's a great goalie. I think to get a 2025 first-round pick as well out of trading Askarov away is great work by Barry Trotz. So for me, giving him an A+.
I agree with you 100%. A+ on the board for Nashville, like you said, man. Fringe team, and this is what the Minnesota Wild and the LA Kings needed to do. Nashville did it. They wanted to go for it, and they are going for it. Like you said, UC Saros, top 10 goalie in the league, $7 million per season. Beautiful. Steven Stamkos, 40 goal scorer, 50 goal scorer. Bang. Johnny Marchessault, former Conn Smythe winner. You can't go wrong with that. Their D-core is going to be insane with Roman Josi and Brady Shea and bringing back Carrier. Man, their D-core is going to be scary, dude. They did get rid of Askarov, which was kind of unfortunate, but was kind of needed to be done, especially after that big Saros extension. It was pretty evident Askarov did not want to be in the organization. And getting back David Edstrom. David Edstrom was part of the trade that brought Tomas Hertl to Vegas. I think he's a good little center prospect. I think he's got a future in the NHL. And also getting a 2025 first from San Jose. That first could be a very, very big beast. Say if Nashville doesn't win it all this year, that's okay. They signed these guys to long-term deals, and they can run it back. And even if they don't go far, that 2025 first could turn into a really good prospect as well. That could help out winning a cup on the latter years of these big contracts. So I think it was a fantastic offseason for the Predators, and I'm very excited to watch them play this year. That's for sure. Let's move on now to another busy team in the NHL, the New Jersey Devils. They made a lot of trades as well. Well, they made a lot of moves, but not a lot of moves, but big name moves. We'll start off, obviously, they acquired Jacob Markstrom from the Calgary Flames in exchange for a 2025 first and Kevin Ball. They also traded not prospect, I guess he did play minutes, but young player Alexander Holtz and goalie Akira Schmid to Vegas. In exchange, they got Paul Cotter and a 2025 third. They acquired Jonathan Kovacevic from Montreal for a 2026 fourth. Then they signed Brett Pesce to a 6-year deal worth $5.5 per season. They also signed Brendan Dillon to a 3-year deal worth $4 million per season. They also signed Tomas Tatar to a 1-year deal worth $1.8 million, and then re-signed Dawson Mercer to a 3-year deal worth $4 million per season. What do you think about the New Jersey Devils, B?
The New Jersey Devils are another team that I think did pretty good work in the offseason. I'm going to give them an A-. This is a team that did not make the playoffs last year, which was a setback for them. They are a team that is looking to contend in the Metropolitan. They've got great young players in Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, forward. I think bringing in some more help like Thomas Tatar, good for them. I do like them re-signing Dawson Mercer. I think he is a pretty good young top six as well. Deal of $4 million, solid for him. And what they did on defense as well, bringing in Brett Pesce, I think he's a really solid top 4 defenseman. Positionally sound. He's a good shutdown D-man. I think he's great for them. Brendan Dillon adds that physicality aspect they could really use as well. They're, from what I know from New Jersey, they're not a very heavy team. They're a fairly skilled, smaller team. So I think bringing in Dillon's a good pickup for them. And the last one, Jacob Markstrom. They needed a number 1 goalie, a good number 1 goalie, and they got it with Jacob Markstrom. So I think they addressed everything that they needed to this summer to get back in the mix in the Metro. So yeah, I'm going to give them an A-. I think they did pretty good work.
I think I'm going to give the Devils a flat A. They did, like you said, very good work. And if the New Jersey Devils stay healthy this year, they are a scary, scary team to play against. Like, you look at their just starting lineup, right? You got your top line of Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt. You got a choice on defense. You got Dougie Hamilton, you got Luke Hughes, Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon. Then you got Markstrom between the pipes and Jake Allen backing him up. That is a deadly team, man. And I think if New Jersey can stay healthy, God forbid anything happens to them, they are going to be a team to just avoid. They are going to be such a tough team. I love the signing of Brett Pesce, such a shutdown, great defenseman. Like you said, Brendan Dillon, big body. He's always, positionally sound, great guy. Tomas Tatar, he can add, 30, 40 points for under $2 million per season. And I think 3 years of $4 million for Dawson Mercer is great. Give him more experience, get him up in the top 6, get him shooting the puck more. I think this was a fantastic offseason for the Devils, and I'm giving them a flat A. All right, Brody, the smallest amount of signings per team on this list. We're talking about the New York Islanders. There was only 2 really notable signings they made this offseason. They have been deathly quiet. They signed Anthony Duclair to a 4-year deal worth $3.5 per season, and they signed Oliver Wahlstrom to a 1x1. What are you giving the Islanders, B?
The Islanders are going to get B's lowest grade. He's not liking what the Islanders did. I'm going to give him a D. The reason that I'm giving him a flat D is that could be taken out of context. I'm giving him a low grade because the Islanders last year barely made the playoffs, and you're seeing rival teams getting better. Like the Devils made a huge splash. They're a team like you guys. Well, the Islanders did get in by the skin of their teeth. The Devils were right there chasing to the end of the season, and they got drastically better. You should want to get better as well. You're trying to make the playoffs again the following year, and they did basically nothing in the offseason. So for me, I don't like what the Islanders did at all. They're getting a D.
I'm giving them a D+, just so I don't have to say I'm giving the Islanders the D. Yeah, like you said, the Islanders, they've done absolutely nothing. Like, I like the Duclair contract. I think Duclair at 3.5 is a fantastic deal. I was big on the Duclair bandwagon, hoping that he'd come to Calgary so they could reunite him with Huberdeau, but alas, never happened. I think Oliver Wahlstrom, give him a chance with that $1 million deal. I think Oliver Wahlstrom has so much untapped potential that realistically, like, he has not, opened up yet. But yeah, like you said, you look at what New Jersey's done. They've gone all out. The Rangers are a stud. The Hurricanes are a stud. Every team in that Metro is fighting for their life, and the Islanders are asleep at the wheel. And I think it's just going to be a nightmare season for New York, and they did not make their case any better in this offseason. So D+, just because I like the Duclair contract. That's it. Let's stick with the New York teams, and let's talk about the Rangers. The Rangers didn't do a heck of a lot, but in my opinion, I think they made some pretty tidy moves. So let's talk about them. New York Rangers re-signed Kaapo Kakko to a 1-year deal worth $2.4 million, kind of a prove-it deal. They also, sneaky move here, placed Barclay Goodrow on waivers, and Barclay Goodrow was claimed by San Jose, so $3 million cap hit off the books. They also traded for Riley Smith from the Pittsburgh Penguins for a 2027 second and a 2025 fifth. They also re-signed Braden Schneider to a 2-year deal worth $2.2 per season. And then they also signed Ryan Lindgren to a 1-year deal worth $4.5. What do you make of the Rangers' moves this offseason, B?
I like what the Rangers did. I mean, they didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but the stuff that they did, I'm going to give them a plus. I do like them freeing up cap space on it's just funny, man. You guys just bouncing from the Sharks over to the Rangers, and he's going back to San Jose to get back with the band. But yeah, overall, like the Rangers, they're a very good team in the Metro. They've got a elite goaltender. They've got a pretty solid defense. Good offensively, contend in the Metro. Didn't need to do anything crazy. They didn't do anything drastic. Do like the moves they made, so I'm gonna give them a B+.
Yeah, I'm on board with that B+ as well. I think the Capo deal is a good deal. Only 2.4 for, a former second overall pick. The thing about Barclay Goodrow, you got to feel for him, man. I know he had a no trade clause in his contract, and the Rangers kind of avoided that by putting him on waivers, and he definitely voiced his concerns, or not concerns, but is being upset about being claimed by San Jose, which I don't blame him. You go from a cup contender all of a sudden to a bottom 3 team in the league, which is kind of tough. But for the Rangers side of things, getting that $3 million cap hit off your books, that's tidy work, man. And that allowed him to get Riley Smith, who, is a 20-goal scorer. He's going to shoot the puck. You got playmakers on that team like Zibanejad and Lafreniere dishing him the puck. Like, he's going to put up 20 easily. I think Braden Schneider at 2.2, great deal. I think he's a young guy with a lot of potential as well. And then Lindgren's just a stud in the defensive zone, blocks every shot known to man. I think, like you said, not a lot of work, but they did what they needed to do, and they did it properly. So B+ for sure for the Rangers. All right, now on to the Ottawa Senators, who, in my opinion, made a lot of moves, but not a lot of significant moves. So I'm just going to rattle through them real quick. First one, they signed Noah Gregor to a 1-year deal under $1 million per season. Probably their biggest signing, they signed David Perron to a 2-year deal worth $4 million per season. They signed Michael Amadio to a 3-year deal, $2.6 per season. They traded Matthew Joseph and a third to St. Louis for future considerations. They signed Shane Pinto to a 2-year deal worth $3.75. They traded Roby Jarvente and a 2025 fourth to Edmonton for Xavier Bourgault and Jake Chason. They signed Nick Cousins to a 1-year deal under $1 million per season. They traded Jacob Chychrun to Washington. This is a decent sized trade. They traded Jacob Chychrun to Washington for Nick Jensen and a 2026 third. They also signed their 7th overall pick from this year's draft, Carter Yakimchuk, to his entry-level contract. And probably the biggest and most important news in Ottawa Senators this year, they signed Nikolai Kulemin to a PTO. Yes, you heard me right. That Nikolai Kulemin, the one on the Leafs a decade ago, that Nikolai Kulemin. They signed him to a PTO. Let's talk about the Senators, Brody. What are you making of their offseason?
There was one other major move that was not mentioned.
Oh no! What did I miss?
They brought in Linus Ullmark.
Oh my god!
Number 1 goalie.
Oh my god! Fire the notes guy. I'm the notes guy, by the way. Don't fire me. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, big Linus Ullmark they brought in from Boston. Big trade. Do you remember the details on that trade?
To be honest, not really. I just know that they brought him in. Ottawa's kind of irrelevant to be.
I'll look it up. Don't you worry, B. But what do you think of their offseason?
I think they did okay. For me, it's a B minus. I mean, they're a team that is in a very difficult division. The Atlantic Division is right now probably the most difficult division in the league. You've got a lot of competitive teams in that league, all trying to. For Ottawa, you're trying to get through Florida, Boston, Tampa, etc. I don't think they did enough to really drastically improve their. Apart from Allmark, like they brought in their number one goalie, but their defense took a hit. I don't like them moving Jacob Chikrin. You have Jake Sanderson, you have Thomas Chabot, but I think Jacob Chikrin is still a very good defenseman who's prime of his career or entering the prime of his career. I don't think you're trying to move that. I don't think it's a good idea to try to trade him when you're trying to be a contending team spots. So I didn't like that move for them. But yeah, overall, I think Ottawa didn't do anything significant to really improve their team this summer, apart from Allmark. So for me, it's a B minus, borderline a C. I didn't really like what they did, to be honest.
All right, so I did the looking up. I figured out the trade. It was Linus Ullmark to the Ottawa Senators. In return, Boston got Jonas Korpisalo, Mark Kastelic, and a first-round pick in the 2024 draft. Now, I looked up what that pick was. That pick ended up being number 25, and they drafted Dean Letourneau. He is a 6'7" right-handed shot center that played in Boston College. Big 6'7" center. So that was the trade. Totally forgot about it. My bad to all you Boston and Ottawa fans. But I still agree with Brody. I'm going to give them a C. I don't think they deserve a B minus at all. They did absolutely really nothing. David Perron's kind of out of his prime. He's not going to do a heck of a lot when he doesn't have a lot around him. But what else did they do? Like Nick Cousins, Noah Gregor, like Michael Amadio's not bad, but like if Michael Amadio is one of your biggest pickups in the offseason, that's pretty rough. Linus Ullmark was a great trade. But realistically, like there's a lot of competition in that Atlantic Division, and Ottawa is not on par, and this offseason did not help him at all. So I'm going to give him a C, and we're going to move on from that dumpster fire. Let's move on to the Flyers, who are arguably another dumpster fire. The Flyers
speaking of dumpster fires.
Yeah, speaking of them. They did not make any trades in the offseason, but they did a heck of a lot of pen to paper. So the first signing they made was Ivan Fedotov. Sorry. He's a big goalie from Russia. 2-year, $3.25 per season. Brody, off the top of your head, how tall is Ivan Fedotov?
6'8", I think.
Oh, he got it. He knew. Yeah, 6'8" goalie Ivan Fedotov. The Flyers also re-signed Eric Johnson to a 1-year, $1 million contract. They re-signed Garnet Hathaway, 2 years, $2.4 per season. They re-signed Bobby Brink, 2 years, $1.5 per season. The big re-signing, Travis Konechny, 8-year deal, making $8.75 per season. And then they signed a couple of former first-round picks. Well, first of all, they signed their 13th overall pick from this year's draft, Jet Luchenko, to an entry-level contract. But then the big one, the huge one, the one that the Flyers fans are all looking forward to this season. They signed 7th overall pick in 2023, Matvei Michkov, to his entry-level contract, and he will be on the Flyers this year. What do you think of the Flyers' moves in this offseason, B?
The Flyers, to me, again, are a team didn't really do a whole heck of a lot. I think the Konechny contract's not bad. Like, he's a solid top 6 forward. He's really your best player on that team. So I think that's a good shot. Signing Fedotov, yeah, like, to be honest, I really don't know much about Philly's goaltending. And I could have sworn there was a third goalie in the mix, apart from Fedotov and that was, I don't know if he was in the I heard a story. I don't know if he was in the KHL or something wanting to come to Philly. There was a third goalie was in that mix. Can't remember.
Alexei Kolosov?
Could be him. I think he was in the KHL.
Yeah.
And there was he wanted to come to Philly, but opportunity or something like I don't know. Anyways, I don't know too much about Philly's goalies, so I can't really say. And yeah, Philly's a team again. dumpster fire didn't really do a whole heck of a lot to improve the dumpster fire. It's just going to keep on burning there for me. So give him a C.
After that Ivan Fedotov signing, he's still not their highest paid goalie because I just looked up their depth chart and I totally forgot they still have Cal Peterson on the roster.
Well, that's a name. I forgot about him.
That just goes to show how tragic the Flyers have been lately. Realistically, out of all of those moves, I think the Konechny signing's a little on the high side. 8.75 is kind of high for Konechny. Like, he's definitely got the heart and soul, and he puts up a decent amount of points every year, but I don't know. At almost 9 mil per season is a little high for me. I think realistically, if you're a Flyers fan right now, you just got to hope to God Matvei Michkov saves the franchise because it's looking rough over there. I'm going to give the Flyers for this offseason a C-. Not great.
Did you hear what Matvei Michkov did? And did you hear what Michkov did in training camp?
Yeah, he pulled a Michigan.
Yeah, right in front of Torts.
Right in front of Torts. It's going to be a long season, man, for Michkov. Pulls a Michigan in front of Torts. I'm surprised his head didn't get taken off that practice. Let's talk about their division rival, though, the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins made actually probably the most trades out of any team other than maybe San Jose in the offseason. But let's talk about what they did. So first of all, they signed, they extended Alex Nedeljkovic to a 2-year deal worth $2.5 per season. They then acquired Kevin Hayes from the St. Louis Blues in a trade for future considerations. They signed defenseman Matt Grzelcyk to a 1-year deal worth $2.75. They also signed Anthony Beauvillier to a 1-year deal worth $1.25. They signed Blake Lizotte to a 2-year deal worth $1.85. They then acquired Cody Glass in that trade from Nashville. Probably one of the more talked about trades in this offseason as for confusing wise. They acquired Rutger McGroarty in a trade from Winnipeg in exchange for Braden Yager. Quite the interesting trade there. But it wouldn't be Pittsburgh if we didn't talk about Sidney Crosby. And of course, Sidney Crosby signing an extension, 2-year deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins. We don't even really got to say the AAV. You guys already know it's 8.7. It's always 8.7. It'll always be 8.7 for Sidney Crosby. What do you think of the offseason for the Penguins, B?
This is a team that I don't really know what Kyle Dubas's plan is. Ever since he came in, Pittsburgh's been a fringe playoff team. Don't know if they're embracing the rebuild. We don't know if they want to contend. They've just been lingering in that limbo zone ever since he came in. And to me, I still don't know what their plan is. Sidney Crosby getting 8.7. Classic. Out of sign Crosby. He's going to be a Penguin for life. Shut those trade rumors down. Retiring. And that Crosby contract just really makes me wish David was the same way. And he was like, give me 9.7.
Give me 9.7, yeah.
The fact that Crosby just doesn't care about the money and he just wants to have a good team around. Signs for 8.7. Kyle, pull up your big pants. Get some help in for Sid. Get your team into the playoffs now before you retire. At least have another shot at the Stanley Cup. And I don't think Pittsburgh did enough to help Sid this summer. Kevin Hayes, what is he, 34, 35, something like that? He's up there, and Pittsburgh's already a pretty old team. They're aging, their core is getting up there, and I just don't think they brought in enough. I like Beauvillier, he's a good young forward, but to me, I don't think Pittsburgh really did it. C.
I'm going to give him a C+ only on the fact that Sidney Crosby loves the team. That's about it. If Sidney Crosby signed for any more than 8.7, Pittsburgh's getting a D, in my opinion. You got Sidney Crosby, who, lifer Penguin, loves the franchise, loves the city. And then you got the opposite personality of Rutger McGroarty, who apparently seems to be like a locker room cancer all of a sudden. And bringing him in is obviously, he's a rookie. He's not really going to help out at all this year. But if that's your big move this offseason, it's going to be a long year for Penguins fans, I think. Nedeljkovic at 2.5. He's had flashes of good, but he's also had a lot of flashes of bad, so that contract's in the air. Kevin Hayes is not going to do a heck of a lot, but welcome Kevin Hayes, I guess. Matt Grzelcyk's a solid little defenseman. I think that was a good contract. Same with Beauvillier for only 1.25. I think that's a great deal. But other than that, man, Pittsburgh, you got Dubas. pick up the phones, man. Wake up. Like, you got to do something. If you got Crosby signing for 8.7 for the next 2 years, build the freaking team around him, man. Like, you got to go for it now. So, C+, I guess, for the Penguins. You can almost give them a C. So, I don't know. Pittsburgh's kind of in a weird spot, so we're going to have to see how their team unfolds in the next few months. But now, let's talk about arguably the busiest team in the offseason, B Roads, and probably one of the worst teams last year, so they had to be busy. We are talking about the San Jose Sharks. First things first, I wrote down in my notes, ironically enough, the first thing I wrote about them was they claimed Barclay Goodrow off waivers. That is obviously not the most important move they made this offseason, but let's keep it rolling. They also got Jake Wallman and a 2024 second from Detroit for future considerations. That was a nice pickup for them for a relatively not huge cap, only about $4 million. They re-signed Luke Kunin to a 1-year deal worth $2.75. They also signed Tyler Teapot Toffoli to a 4-year deal worth $6 million per season. They also signed a sneaky good center in Alex Wenberg to a 2-year deal worth $5 million per season. They signed Ty Dellandrea to a 2-year deal worth $1.3 after trading for him. They signed Carl Grundstrom to a 2-year deal worth $1.8 per season. Then they made a couple trades as well. They acquired Cody Ceci from the Oilers and a 2025 third for Ty Emberson. And then they also acquired Yaroslav Askarov, that big trade with Nashville, getting Askarov, Nolan Burke, and a 2025 third for Magnus Krona, David Edstrom, and a 2025 first. Now, they also had 2 picks in the top 11 of this year's draft, obviously being the first overall pick, that being Macklin Celebrini. That is a huge pickup for the San Jose Sharks franchise. He is arguably going to be a top 10 player in the league in the future. But they also picked up Sam Dickinson at 11th overall, defenseman from the London Knights, very good two-way guy. They signed both of them to their entry-level contracts. Busy offseason for the Sharks. What do you make of it, B?
I think the San Jose Sharks had a pretty good offseason. This is a team that is obviously rebuilding. They brought in Macklin Celebrini overall piece, and I think they brought in some pieces to help him right off the hop. Like, brought in Tyler Toffoli, who can score 20 goals a season, possibly 30. Alex Wenberg is a sneaky good pickup, like good center. He'd be the good number 2 seat. And I think they just brought in some veterans as well, like Cody Ceci, pick up for them, like he's top 4 defense. He'll bring in leadership and experience for a rebuilding Sharks team. Really, their cap hits don't matter for they're not going to be anywhere near the cap ceiling. I think bring in the pieces that you can to help in sell it right off the hop, give him some leadership, give mentor, so to speak, and bringing in Askarov as well, like your goalie of the future, I think is a great move for the Sharks. So for me, I think they did everything that they wanted to do, and for me, I'll give them an A. I think they had a good offseason.
This is going to be one of the rare ratings I give out. I think the Sharks are one of the only teams that get an A+ for me as well. I think this was a fantastic offseason, very busy for them. Obviously, it doesn't hurt when you get the first overall pick. Macklin Celebrini is going to be a fantastic player for the Sharks. I think as well Sam Dickinson is going to be a fantastic defenseman of the future for the Sharks as well. Like you said, getting your goalie of the future, Yaroslav Askarov, for relatively not that much. Like David Edstrom in a first and Magnus Krona, I don't think is really that much to give up for a potential very good goalie in Askarov. And then, yeah, like you said, they brought in good pieces to throw in that team. They re-signed Luke Kunin. They got Tyler Toffoli. I really like Jake Wallman. I think he's going to be good. Wenberg, Dellandrea, Grundstrom, good offensive depth. I think this is a fantastic offseason for the Sharks. I think they had a lot to work with, but they also made a lot of good moves. And I'm going to give them one of my only A+. I think it was great. Now let's talk about another team on the west side of the USA. Another team that was relatively quiet, but man, they made some big signings too. We're going to talk about the Seattle Kraken. Well, on day one of the free agency on July 1st, the Kraken went out and signed 2 big-name players, of course, signing Stanley Cup champion Brandon Montour to a 7-year deal worth $7.14 per season. They weren't done there, though. They also signed another former Stanley Cup champion in Chandler Stevenson to a 7-year deal worth $6.25 per season. They then traded Brian Dumoulin to the Anaheim Ducks for a 2026 fourth, getting him off of the books. They then signed Eeli Tolvanen to a 2-year deal worth $3.475 per season, and then re-signing Big Adam Larson to a 4-year deal worth $5.25. But on top of that, the Seattle Kraken also had the 8th overall pick in this year's draft, which they drafted Berkeley Catton, and they also signed him to his entry-level contract. What do you think about the small but boisterous offseason for the Seattle Kraken?
I don't really know what to say about Seattle. Like, I'll give him a B. Like, Brandon Montour, he is a good top 4 defenseman, but that cap hit to me a little high. I think $7.14 million seems a bit high to me for Montour. And same with Chandler Stevenson. Like, he's a good center. Like, he's a good piece for them. But 6.25 for Chandler Stevenson seems a hair high for me. Adam Larson, he's a solid top 4 defense, good shutdown, plays physical. He's a good signing for them, but 5.25 maybe a slightly high for him as well. But I guess the cap is going up, so it's not a huge deal. But I do like Eeli Tolvanen though. He's kind of a slept-on player. He's pretty good young forward. But yeah, overall Seattle for me, I'll give him a B. Nothing crazy this offseason. So yeah, I'll give him a B.
I'm actually surprised by that rating. I thought you'd give him a little bit higher, in my opinion. I think the Kraken did quick, tidy work, honestly. I'm going to give him an A-. I actually think that Brandon Montour contract was fantastic. Like, he only had 33 points, but he only played 66 games last year. The year before that, though, he had 73 points in 80 games, including 16 goals from the blue line. I think he's going to be a stud defenseman, and I think him playing in the West is honestly going to be pretty good for Seattle. Chandler Stevenson, yeah, 6.25 might be a little high for him, but he's going to be a fantastic center, and I think Seattle's going to have a great center core when Matty Beniers picks it up and Shane Wright starts, getting on the team and stuff like that. I think they're going to have a fantastic center core. I think getting Brian Dumoulin off the books for free, essentially, the 2026 fourth, is fantastic. Adam Larson contract, great. 5.25 is a fantastic AAV for him. And then Eeli Tolvanen, like you said, I really like him as well. He's a sneaky shooter as well. And 3.475 is very good for a guy that could play your second line winger. And then, yeah, Berkeley Catton, I think he's going to be a fantastic center as well in the future. I don't know. I thought Seattle had a fantastic offseason. Definitely not as good as like teams like the Sharks and stuff like that, but I'm going to give Seattle probably about an A-. I think what they did was tidy, and I think it was a decent offseason for them. All right, St. Louis Blues. One of the teams that really didn't do a heck of a lot, but I mean, they were involved in that controversy with the offer sheets, but let's talk about the Blues and what they've done this offseason. So first things first, they signed Kasperi Kapanen to a 1-year deal worth $1 million. Then they acquired Matthew Joseph from Ottawa with a 2025 third for future considerations. They also acquired Radek Faksa from Dallas for future considerations. Then they signed probably one of their biggest offensive weapons, Pavel Buchnevich Pascal. 6-year deal, $8 million per season. They then signed brother of Matthew Joseph, P.O. Joseph, to a 1-year deal worth $950,000. And then they also signed their 16th overall pick in this year's draft, Adam Juracek, to his ELC. If that last name sounds familiar to you, that is the brother of Blue Jackets defenseman David Juracek. Then we also have the big offer sheets. Obviously, getting Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg from the Oilers. In exchange, what was it? I don't even remember the years, but it was a 2nd and a 3rd round pick they gave up as compensation. But then they also traded a 2028 third to the Oilers after for future considerations, which I'm pretty sure was a, hey, if you don't match this deal, we'll give you a third as well. So that was pretty much the offseason for the St. Louis Blues. What do you make of that, B. Rhodes?
I think what St. Louis did was pretty solid. I think they had a pretty good offseason. I think for them, picking up Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg is good work by them. They're trying to contend in a top-heavy Central Division. They were right on the cusp last year. They just missed. They just added a good young forward in Dylan Holloway and a good young defenseman in Broberg. Help for their future. This is a team that has a lot of young forwards. Gordon Kyrou, Robert Thomas, Jake Neighbors, Holloway, and Philip Broberg into the work for them. And what were the other moves that you mentioned there? Sorry.
They re-signed Pavel Buchnevich 6 years.
Oh yeah, Buchnevich. That was a player the Oilers were actually interested in at the trade deadline, but were not willing to give up. Funny enough, Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. And then St. Louis is like, all right, we'll just take him anyways for nothing then. But yeah, again, that's a good move for them to pick up Pavel Buchnevich. He's a great forward in this league. He's like a 30-goal scorer, 65-point guy at this point in his career. So yeah, I think the Blues did good work. I'll give them a B+. I think they had a pretty good offseason.
Yeah, I think I'm right on board with you there with a B+. Like you said, Pavel Buchnevich, $8 million, definitely worth it. I think that's a great contract. I like that they brought on both the Joseph brothers. I think that's pretty cool. Seeing brothers play together in the NHL is always a cool thing. I think getting Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg for a second and 2/3 is tidy work, seeming that they were both former first-round picks. And especially seeing them perform in the playoffs, kind of exploding out of nowhere. I think they're going to be fantastic players in the future, and St. Louis has got the cap space to kind of mess around and give Broberg that chance. Like you said, pretty high AAV for Broberg, but I think they have that, space to give him an opportunity and then a lot more ice time to give him the opportunity. Like you said, I think it's tidy work by the Blues. I think they did good. Nothing really drastic, but definitely good work. So B+ for sure. All right, let's move over to the Tampa Bay Lightning now. Now, Tampa Bay didn't do a heck of a lot amount-wise, but big names. We got big names in here. So let's start it off. 2024 NHL Draft. The Tampa Bay Lightning made a huge trade to the Utah Jazz. They traded Mikhail Sergachev. In return, they got J.J. Moser, Connor Geekie, a 2025 second, and a 2024 seventh. Big trade. They then also traded Tanner Jeannot to the LA Kings for a 2025 second and a 2024 fourth. Then they acquired the rights to Jake Gensel from Carolina for a 2025 third. They then signed Jake Gensel to a 7-year deal worth $63 million, which works out to $9 million per season. They then also extended Victor Hedman to a 4-year contract worth $32 million, so $8 million per season. They also then named him captain of the franchise after Steven Stamkos left. Then they signed Cam Atkinson to a 1-year deal worth $900,000. And last but not least, they signed newly acquired J.J. Moser to a 2-year deal worth $3.375 per season. How about that offseason from Tampa Bay? What do you think?
Utah Jazz. We talk about B-ball now?
Did I say Jazz?
Yeah, you said Utah Jazz.
Shout out Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, Tampa had an interesting offseason. Sure, Victor Hedman was the obvious choice for captain. I knew it the second Stamkos. Yeah, I think them picking up Jake Gensel is a pretty good pickup. That first line's gonna be scary, man. Jake Gensel, Braden Point, and Nikita Kucherov on your top line, that's terrifying. But yeah, Tampa Bay to me is a team that I think is on the decline now. They've kind of fallen out of elite Stanley Cup contender status for me. But yeah, I think the moves they made were not too bad. Drastic, apart from bringing in Jake Gensel, replace Steven Stamkos, but I don't think they really did a whole lot to improve their roster. So for me, I'll give them I think they had a decent offseason, but not a great offseason.
I'm glad you reset your rating because I actually took off my headphones and walked away from my desk. I went and grabbed my Utah Jazz jersey. I figured it was only fitting since I slipped up and said Utah Jazz. But yeah, no, Sergachev trade, big trade. JJ Moser, I think, is going to be a pretty good defenseman in the future. He's got a couple more years to kind of grow and stuff like that. Connor Geeky, great prospect. Looking forward to seeing him thrive. I agree with you saying that they're definitely not elite cup contenders anymore. I think they still got a couple more years. I think when that Victor Hedman contract ends in 4 years, I think that's pretty much going to be at the point where they got to tear it down. But I do like the extension for Hedman. Only giving him 8 per year is a really tidy deal. The JJ Moser contract as well, 3.375 per year is really good. And then Jake Gensel too, like bona fide sniper. He's going to be your Stamkos replacement, and that top 6 is going to be filthy. So, yeah, I think, like you said, Tampa Bay, they made some pretty big moves, not a lot of moves, but I think what they did was pretty good. I think it wasn't crazy good, but I think it's definitely worth a B. So I'll go with that for them as well. All right. The most followed team in the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's talk about them. Lots of signings. No trades except for the rights to Chris Tanev from Dallas. They end up giving up Max Ellis and a 2026 7th to get his rights. They then sign him to a 6-year deal worth $4.5 per season. And now here comes the signings. We got Max Domi, 4 years, $3.75. Timothy Liljegren, 2 years, $3 per year. Joseph Wolf, 3 years, $3.66 per year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 4 years, $3.5 per year. Anthony Stolarz, 2 years, $2.5 per year. Yanni Hakanpää, 1 year, $1.47. Nicholas Robertson, they re-signed to a 1 year worth $875,000. And also another big one, they signed Max Pacioretty to a PTO. Now, this was talked about by Elliot Friedman in the 32 Thoughts podcast. There is very, very good chance that they labeled this as a PTO, but this is a for sure signing for the Leafs. Like, there's no doubt that Pacioretty at the end of preseason will be still in a Leafs uniform. So, what do you think of this offseason fiasco for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I do like what they did with the decor this offseason for sure. That was I think a big issue for them, and why they couldn't get out of the first round past is depth on the blue line. Brought in Chris Tanev and OEL. Re-signing Timothy Liljegren is pretty solid as well. As for the forward core, I do like them re-signing Max Domi. I do think he's a pretty solid middle top 6 guy, top 9 guy as well. Got a physicality aspect to him as well. He's a tough kid. Definitely something you'll need come playoff time for sure. And it's funny that you mentioned Max Pacioretty because he for sure will make that roster. Like, he's been a 40 goal scorer in the past. Like, obviously I don't think he's at that stage in his career anymore, but he's definitely a good depth option for playing the top 6. 9 versatile option for them. And the thing that's funny to me about Max Pacioretty is he wears a certain number that has a bit of significance to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe it's a sign that if he's on the team, he'll get over that hump and get it done. Yeah, you're picking up what I'm saying now.
I was like, wait, where are you going with this? I was like, he wears 67. Like, how is that significant? Yeah, if you know, you know, I guess, huh?
If you know, you know. But maybe he's the piece that gets him over the hump. But I do like what they did this offseason, but I am a little bit concerned about the goaltending. I don't know if Joseph Woll is ready to really take on the rank number 1 goalie. And Anthony Stolarz is not a bad backup, but that goaltending to me is a bit concerning. So I'll give him a B+. I think they made some good moves, but I think they could have addressed that goaltending a little more.
You know, in all honesty, I think I trust this goaltending tandem of Woll and Stolarz a lot more than Samsonov and Martin Jones. So, granted, Woll and Stolarz still, like, is not a fantastic duo, but I think it's a slight upgrade. But I do agree with everything else you said. Their decor, picking up that depth, man. Chris Tanev, like I said, Flames fan, watched him put his body on the line every damn game for the Flames. He is going to be a fan favorite for sure in Toronto. OEL's an interesting one. Obviously, Stanley Cup champion, OEL, but he's going to be an interesting defenseman. It'll be interesting to see who they put him with, if they put him with Tanev, or if they put him with McCabe or Liljegren or Morgan Riley, whoever they put him with. The Nicholas Robertson one's interesting. I think there's still a lot of belief that because Nicholas Robertson still signed, I think it was just easier for Toronto to find a deal with him under contract. So I'm pretty sure Nicholas Robertson will not stay a Leaf, but we'll have to see. As for that, I mean, Toronto did what they needed to do. They upgraded it a little bit. They didn't overspend too much, and I think they're going to be still a solid contender in this league this year. I think, yeah, B+ is pretty good for them. All right, the newest team in the NHL, the Utah Hockey Club. Now, the Utah Hockey Club did not make a single signing in this offseason, but they did make 2 drastic trades this offseason. Obviously, the first one being the Mikhail Sergachev trade from Tampa Bay, but the second one as well, they acquired John Marino and a 2024 fifth from New Jersey for a 2024 second and a 2025 second. Not a crazy offseason for the Utah Hockey Club. Obviously, still preoccupied by trying to figure out what team name they're going to go with. But what do you think of those 2 trades for Utah, Brody?
I do like those moves for them. I think picking up Mikhail Sergachev is a great pickup for Utah. Like, they do improve that. But there was one significant move that Utah did make that might have been mentioned after for something. Did re-sign Dylan Guenther to, and I can't remember what the AAV is. I think it's like 7
something. I'll look it up.
7.14 maybe. I don't know, that number's popping into my.
I totally
I think
forgot
it was
about
something
that.
like.
Curse you, Puckpedia, for not putting that in your notes. 7.14 is the number. Good memory there, B.
But yeah, Dylan Guenther is a pretty good forward already. I was looking at his numbers in the NHL. Like, he's actually like not too far off of being a point per game player already. He's on a pretty good pace. He's only going to get better with age. He's a great player. You like that signing for that. But yeah, like you said, not a whole lot going on there, but I think what they did good. So I'll give him the same grade as the Leafs. I'll give him a B+.
Yeah, Dylan Guenther had 35 points in 45 games last year with Arizona with 18 goals. And yeah, in his career, he's got 50 and 78. 50 points in 78 games. So yeah, you're not wrong. He's not far off, but he definitely does have the potential to be a point per game or better. So I do like that signing. I think the first couple of years might seem like a little bit of an overpay, but I definitely think that contract will pay for what it's worth in the following years. Yeah, like you said, not a lot done by Utah, but they made some solid trades to help try and push themselves away from the bottom of the league and start getting closer to that contending. I like that Connor Ingram is still running as their starter. I think Connor Ingram's got a lot to prove and not a lot to lose, so I think he's going to be a fun goalie to watch this year. And of course, their top 6, like their forward core's fun. Clayton Keller, Guenther, stuff like that. Like, they're going to be a fun team. It's going to be fun watching them in their inaugural season, and yeah, B+. I'll give them a B. I don't think it's quite B+ because they didn't do a heck of a lot, but the moves that they did was pretty solid. So I'll give them a B for that. All right. Vancouver Canucks. We got 4 more teams to go, so let's get through them quickly. Vancouver Canucks obviously started off the offseason by trading Sam Lafferty and Ilya Mikheyev to the Blackhawks. Big cap dump there. They then re-signed Dakota Joshua to a 4-year deal worth $3.25 per season. They signed Tyler Myers to a 3-year deal worth $3 million per season. Then they signed their big offseason pickup was Jake DeBrusk. They signed him to a 7-year deal worth $5.5 per season. They also signed Danton Heinen to a 2-year deal worth $2.25 per year. They signed veteran defenseman Derek Forbort to a 1-year deal worth $1.5. They also signed Vincent Desharnais to a 2-year deal worth $2 million per season. They re-signed their goalie Arthur Shilofs to a 2-year deal worth $850,000. Then they had that trade with the Oilers where they traded Vasily Podkolzin for a 2025 fourth. And last but not least, they also picked up Kevin Lankin into a 1-year deal worth $875,000. What do you think about the Canucks there, B?
I'm pretty high on what Vancouver did this offseason. Last year, they were a team that won the Pacific Division. They really proved what they could do under Rick Tocchet. They second round, lost in Game 7 to the Oilers. However, they were missing Brock Besser, and I think that was a factor in why the Canucks lost that series.
And Thatcher Demko, too.
And Thatcher Demko. So I was just going to say.
Yeah.
I think the Canucks, when they're a healthy team, are a team that can challenge Oilers to beat this coming season. I think they added some pieces to their forward core. I like Jake DeBrusk. I think with Vancouver, he's got the potential to get to about goals, 40, 50 points, I think is realistic. Jake DeBrusk. Danton Heinen, again, he's pretty solid, but I like what they did with that blue line, too. They got bigger, they got tougher, bringing in Desharnais, good shot blocker. Watching him with the Oilers, he's physical, he can log some minutes, right shot, which is also pretty sought after in the league. Got size. Same with Tyler Myers. Like, there's big blue line, there's scary blue line with that size and that grit. Again, is pretty important come playoff time. So I like what the Canucks did. I'll give him an A-. I don't think it was huge off season, but it was a pretty good off.
I agree with you straight across the board, especially about that D-core. Like you said, they have such a big and tough defense core, which just allows Quinn Hughes to play his game and go out there and have fun and put up 100 points, man. Like, Tyler Myers, Vincent Desharnais, Carson Soucy, Derek Forbort. Try going through that in the postseason, you're going to come out with broken bones, man. Like, they are a tough and rough D-core. And I think Vancouver, like you said, did everything that they needed to do. They picked up some depth. They picked up forward and defensive depth. Linking Sheloff. Sheloff's had a really good postseason too, so bringing him back for under $1 million per season is great. Getting Kevin Lankinen, not a huge pickup, but giving some extra depth in case injuries, stuff like that. I think they did everything right, and yeah, A- for sure for the Canucks, even borderline A, honestly. Let's talk about Vegas, another team in the Pacific Division. Now, Vegas really hasn't done a lot this offseason. They did make 2 relatively bigger trades, but as for signings, not a heck of a lot. They traded goalie Logan Thompson to Washington for a 2024 third and a 2025th. I'm not sure what that pick is because I accidentally lost it. I think it's another third. But then they also traded Paul Cotter in a 2025 third to New Jersey and got Alexander Holtz and Akira Schmid. They also signed Ilya Samsonov to a 1-year deal worth 1.8, and then they signed Victor Olofsson to a 1-year deal worth 1.075. Let me hear it about the Vegas Golden Knights, B.
Vegas, to me, is a team that I don't really think they did a whole heck of a lot. I don't know how I feel about them moving Logan Thompson to the Capitals. Like, he's a young goalie. He's a good goalie. I know they got Aiden Hill as their number one. I think good goalie tandems in this league are important, and with Robin Leonard not coming back, I don't think all.
No.
Not really ideal for Vegas there. Victor Olofsson, he's a pretty solid forward, good top 6 forward, top 9 forward, somewhere in that range. Yeah, I just don't think Vegas did anything too drastic for me. So I'm going to give him a B-. Nothing crazy. Not a bad offseason, not a great offseason.
I think the big thing to point out with Logan Thompson is he did request a trade. So that kind of hurt the Vegas Golden Knights. Good on them for getting Akira Schmid and Alexander Holtz for Paul Cotter. I think that was a very tidy trade. Akira Schmid, I think, can be a solid number 2 goalie. Him and Samsonov will obviously fight for that number 2 spot, with Aiden Hill being the number 1. I love the Victor Olofsson contract. I think Victor Olofsson is definitely slept on. He could put up 20 goals in a season for sure. All in all, I think Vegas this year, especially this offseason, I think it's a run it back year. You know, they did their damage when they got Tomas Hertl at the deadline and stuff like that, but I think this is more so a run it back. I still think they're a very good team. I think if they stay healthy, they can definitely compete for a top spot in the West, but this offseason, a little bit lackluster. You know, the cards were kind of dealt against them with Logan Thompson. I'm going to give them a B-. I think, you know, they did some things, nothing crazy, but they didn't really damage their team that much as well.
I totally forgot they had Ilya Samsonov, by the way. That's my bad. I forgot they had him.
I mean, he's pretty forgettable too, am I right, Leaf fans? All right, let's talk about the last 2 teams. Washington Capitals. Washington was a pretty quiet team other than 3 relatively bigger trades. Obviously, we just talked about the Logan Thompson trade that they got for a couple picks. They also got Jacob Chychrun from the Ottawa Senators for Nick Jensen and a 2026 third. And then, of course, the trade that I forgot about, they also acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois from the LA Kings for Darcy Kemper. They also signed Brandon Duhaime to a 2-year contract worth 1.85, and then signed Matt Roy to a big contract, 6 years, 5.75 per season. What is your thought process with the Washington Capitals of this offseason?
I actually like what the Capitals did, to be honest. I'm going to give them some credit for the work that they did. Like, they brought in Logan Thompson, pretty solid young goaltender. I like how they brought in Pierre-Luc Dubois. They needed a center. They don't have Backstrom. They don't have Kuznetsov anymore. I think bringing in Dubois is a good move for them as well. They also brought in a pretty solid defense line. Like, Jacob Chikrin's a good young defenseman. Capitals are a team that's not going full rebuild mode. They're trying to stay competitive, and I think they did what they needed to do to remain competitive and still give Ovi a shot to break Gretzky's goal record. So for me, I'm going to give the Capitals a B+. I think what they did, they addressed some things that they needed to address in the offseason, and I thought the work they did was pretty tidy. So B+ for me.
I'm going to make my first, and probably of many, bold claims for this NHL season. I think Ovechkin breaks the goal record this year because of Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, hear me out. I know, Pierre-Luc Dubois, lazy player. I think Ovi whips him into shape. I honestly think that Ovi's going to say, hey, you're here on this team. You were going to work your ass off. And I think Pierre-Luc Dubois, alongside Ovechkin, is going to be a nasty little 1-2 punch. Granted, it's going to be slow. They're going to be very slow. But I think you get them offensive zone time, and they are going to be deadly together. And I think, Ovi's going to put up a ton of goals with PLD as his center. But yeah, I like the Logan Thompson trade as well. Getting Logan Thompson for only a couple picks, very good deal. Logan Thompson's got a lot to prove after winning the Cup with Vegas and kind of being sheltered as a number 2 goalie. I think he wants to prove that he's a starter. Jacob Chikrin, like we know, is a very good defenseman. I think he's going to be great with John Carlson. And then, yeah, I think Washington, like you said, did really good. Sometimes you don't need to do a lot to have a good offseason. I think Washington proved that. And I think, yeah, I'm going to give him an A-, actually. I think it was a great offseason for Washington. All right, the final team, the Winnipeg Jets. Let's talk about them. First things first, re-signing Dylan DeMello to a 4-year deal worth $4.9 per season. They then also signed Colin Miller to a 2-year deal worth $1.5 per season. They then acquired Dylan Coghlan from the Carolina Hurricanes for future considerations. They re-signed Logan Stanley to a 2-year deal worth $1.25 per season. They also traded Rutger McGroarty to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Braden Yager. And last but not least, they re-signed Cole Perfetti to a 2-year deal worth $3.25. Let's hear it about the Winnipeg Jets, B.
The Winnipeg Jets. I mean, for starters, to me, that Dylan DeMello contract seems very high. $4.9 million a season. I do like what they did with Cole Perfetti, though, getting him for 2 years at $3.25. I think great young forward. He's got a lot to prove. I think he's definitely got the potential to be a 24 in this guy. I could do that. Being realistic, I like them bringing back Logan Stanley. He's a big body on that blue line. Good shot blocker, physical, pretty sound defensively. But for Winnipeg, I think you'd want to do a bit more than they did this summer after seeing what Nashville did in your division. Like, you're trying to be still remaining competitive in that division, top 3 spot. Like, you got to get through Dallas, Colorado, Nashville if you're the Winnipeg Jets. And to me, I just don't think they did enough to really bolster their team. They have a pretty solid roster, but I would have liked to see them try to do something. So for me, I'll give them a B. I think they had a decent offseason, but I think they could have done more as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. I think I'm going to give them a B- over a B. Not to say that they didn't have a bad offseason, but I definitely agree with you. They should have done more, especially seeing their division rivals, bolster up like crazy. Like you said, the Dylan DeMello contract, a little bit of a head scratcher. It's a little bit high in AAV. Thank God it's only for 4 years, though. But the other signings that they made, other than the DeMello signing, they were great. Like, Colin Miller's a very underrated defenseman for 1.5. Cole Perfetti for under 4 per year is great. Logan Stanley, good depth defenseman. He can play 40 games in case of injury. And then I like that they picked up Braden Yager. I think Braden Yager is going to be a stud in this league. I think he's going to be a very good player. And I like that 1-for-1 trade, especially, since the cards were dealt against them and Rutger McGroarty wanted out. They didn't really have a lot of options. And to be able to get a first-round pick prospect out of that is a pretty sweet deal. So I definitely think Winnipeg, like you said, Could have done a lot more. Should have done a lot more. What they did wasn't too bad, but definitely needed to do more. So I think B- is very fitting. All right, B. Well, that about ends it for our first episode back for Chel Talk with Zuu and Bee. Is there any final thoughts you have before we send off the listeners?
Hopefully the fans are just as excited for the hockey season as we are, man. It's just around the corner.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and make sure you tune in. We will be trying to aim for weekly episodes, if not bi-weekly episodes, but we're glad to be back. We're glad to be talking about hockey, and we're so glad hockey is back. So if you guys did enjoy this episode of the podcast, make sure to stick around for more episodes. If you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe as well. You can catch our podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, whether it be Spotify for podcasts, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, etc. But as always, my name is Zuu. I was joined with B Rhodes, and I hope you guys have a great time. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.